This time, we will talk about the story of a heroine who sadly ended her first life before being reborn. The girl's name was Ariana Bronte, and being the daughter of a duke did nothing to ease her suffering. In her first life, this lady always tried to be strong, no matter how cruel her relatives were to her. She did not show hatred towards people in the hope that one day they would truly love her. But for some reason, her pleas for acceptance were never heard by any of the heavenly rulers. Even her own husband treated Arena cruelly, because in his eyes, she was just an instrument. Gerald Ratan knew how to speak many beautiful words, but they were all far from the real truth. However, for the lost and lonely Bronte, this man became salvation from a terrible life with her family. She didn't hesitate for a moment as she surrendered herself into the arms of a strong and handsome man. With him, the heroine was ready to lose her mind, just to stay close, and that is exactly what happened. Only the first few weeks of marriage to Gerald were the best in the life of the Duke's young daughter. For the first time in a long time, Ariana was over the moon that someone was being kind to her. But the prince's plans for the girl were much more dangerous and larger scale than she could have imagined. Before Ariana knew it, her hands were stained with blood from her husband's cruel orders. So the betrayal hit the girl who carried out every order of her beloved husband many times harder. One day, he made it clear that their situation was once again like heaven and earth. No matter how much Ariana tried to reach for a warm embrace, she was rewarded only with cold blades. She couldn't even imagine that Ratan himself would end up choosing her younger sister, which he would like more. Their union brought devastating pain to the lady who had recently believed in love. But life was once again falling apart before the eyes of the girl, who could not protect herself from betrayal. The result of marriage for Ariana was a return to the cold dungeon where she had previously spent much time. Even the middle sister, Helena Bronte, did not feel sorry for her eldest, who was not accepted in this place. Until her death, the heroine was never able to understand why everyone around her hated her so much. For some reason, every single person in the Bronte estate was unable to resist making nasty comments towards Ariana, and it had been like this since childhood, as if someone had cursed the little girl, and now she was responsible for it. In those moments, the heroine desperately clung to any contact with her mother, even if it brought her pain. Only now did she realize that all this time she had been senselessly running after the woman, that she had not wanted to look at her. Rachel had other daughters, so she allowed the eldest, who was from a man she didn't love, to be neglected. So, as soon as the girl grew up, her mother decided to marry her off for her own benefit. At that time, Ariana didn't know that her every action was carefully planned by the cruel Rachel, and no man was ready to sincerely love a girl who was not respected by anyone in the estate. While the lady forgot everything at the sight of the outstretched hand, as she hoped to feel love, but society remained deaf to Arena's pitiful eyes, and she spent her time alone. In her entire life, instead of beatings and bullying, the lady never once felt human warmth. This is what caused the most pain to Ariana, who did nothing bad to her family. However, even Helena did not feel sorry for her older sister, and her eyes reflected the desire to see death. Only towards the end of her life did the heroine realize that, for everyone, she had always remained an empty and worthless person. That is why the sister sent her elder sister to her death with such ease, because after that, she would live happier. The noose that was hung for Ariana in the dungeon had actually been tightened around her neck since childhood. But the girl stubbornly refused to accept the reality in which no one needed her. The heroine had no other choice but to follow the cruel fate that her family had chosen for her. At that moment, all the girl's thoughts were filled with a burning desire to find a place for all the pain. But no amount of suffering on Ariana's face could move Helena, who wanted to see her relative's death, to pity her. The Duke of Bronte's second daughter has long been rotten from the inside, just like the rest of the family on the estate. So Helena personally sent Ariana to the next world, hoping that she would never hear from her again. At that moment, the heroine prayed to all the gods for a rebirth in which she would no longer have to suffer. What the lady feared most was to feel the pain of a broken heart and lack of love again. She no longer wanted to love and be loved, as her entire consciousness was filled only with revenge. Although Helena couldn't read minds, she was terrified at that moment when she saw Ariana's face. The deceased was unfairly accused of something she did not do, but no one cared. This is how cruelly the life of the heroine ended, who all the time was just trying to find love for herself. Everyone then decided that the girl committed suicide out of shame, because she was considered guilty of the deaths. For the first time in a long time, peace reigned throughout the empire, without rebellions or betrayals within the country. The delicate balance between the four rulers was achieved with great difficulty, but it was maintained. The Duke of the East, named Russell White, was the most careful of all to ensure that the rules were followed. He was opposed by Rodion Oblin, who ruled the West and constantly stirred up quarrels between the allies. Only the Duke of the South kept aloof from all political problems and did not even disclose his name. But the Duke of the North, who became the young Cyrus Karha, was not afraid to openly express his discontent. His name quickly became known throughout the empire due to the fearlessness and cruelty of the young man. He quickly led the resistance against the secret guild of Paganus, which prevented the cardinal directions from uniting. The young duke kept quiet for a long time, although in reality he was gathering strength for an uprising against Rattan. He was the only one who did not believe that the previous ruler was killed by a young girl from the Bronte family. Therefore, after a few years, Cyrus declared war on Gerald, whom he suspected of all the crimes. This is how he unexpectedly took revenge for the death of Ariana, who was killed by her husband and younger sister. Karka personally cut off the heads of the traitors, who blamed another person for their actions. In the heroine's past life, she never met this person who could support her. Ariana died much earlier, and did not even know that she was posthumously acquitted, thanks to the Duke of the North. And so it happened that the girl was reborn into her youth, so she was destined to meet the Duke. The guy didn't yet know what future awaited him, but for some reason, he became interested in the blue-haired lady. As soon as the girl opened her eyes after waking up, she couldn't believe what was happening around her. For a long time, Ariana was unable to understand why she remained alive, and even returned to the past. She clearly remembered how she committed suicide under pressure from her sister and remained in a cold dungeon. But now the lady found herself in the past, when she had not yet met Gerald, who had so cruelly destroyed her. And no one around noticed the changes, except the girl herself, who was wary of the family. She has been closely monitoring her relatives for the past few days, trying to come to her senses. The middle sister Helena had not changed a bit, and still hoped for the attention of the Duke of the North. And the younger sister Vittoria paid attention only to her own beauty and status in society. Everything in their lives was calm and peaceful, and they did not even suspect that the future could change. All because Ariana did not intend to relive those terrible events that led to her death. She remembered well how much effort her sisters had put into making her suffer. Therefore, this time, the heroine rejected only one thought about love for loved ones, which she no longer needed. The girl's heart was hardened by the events of the past, and she was no longer able to believe in miracles. As before, everyone in the estate treated Ariana badly, even though she was the daughter of the Duke of the East. Even the maids made the blue-haired lady's life worse, taking out their anger and weakness on her. The heroine managed to forget about the day when she was brought bad food because of a false accusation of theft. The smirk on Louise's assistant suggested that she was the one involved in this unpleasant affair. Ariana forever remembered the shame that this cunning maid of the estate made her experience. Of course, the lady had nothing to do with the missing necklace, but no one wanted to believe her. In the past, she refused to eat food that made her look so terrible that even animals wouldn't touch her. The lady's punishment was beatings, which attracted Bronte's grandmother, although she rarely appeared. But all of Ariana's words never reached the ears of the madam, since the evidence was against the miss. Louise had thought everything through in advance, so at the right moment, she took out the hidden necklace from under the table. That's how terribly that day ended for the heroine, who in fact did nothing bad. But this time, the girl was ready for all the meanness from the maid who wanted to blame her. Louise was stubborn in her desire to force the young lady to eat this inedible food. The maid took advantage of the fact that all the aristocrats of the estate openly laughed at the daughter of another duke. That's why she tried so hard to please her owners, completely sharing their unpleasant mood. The servant's soul and heart had long been rotten, so she felt no pity for poor Ariana. The assistant was happy to see the efforts of the blue-haired girl who did not fight back. Usually, servants were not allowed to offend those who were higher in status, but in this case, Louise should not be punished. Only this time, the heroine's eyes did not go out, as the fire of hatred inside her was much stronger. She saw that even the clothes on this servant were much better than those that were brought to her. But the assistant did not leave the lady any chance to rest, as she increasingly enjoyed mocking her. Louise quickly got into the swing of things when she noticed that Ariana, for some reason, didn't even try to resist. But the Duke's daughter's gaze remained just as determined, which frightened the maid. The heroine felt power in this situation, despite the fact that she was the one being beaten the whole time. But the girl had a plan, so she took all the beatings so calmly in order to achieve more. Ariana understood perfectly well that she could not openly confront her offenders. So, although Louise clearly noticed the change in her behavior, the lady herself maintained a calm face. The assistant really did begin to think that someone else had appeared in the place of the blue-haired lady. Before she could formulate this thought, Ariana suddenly doubled over as if she was in pain. Miss had not allowed herself to show weakness before, but now there was no other way. She quickly brought the assistant, who expected fortitude and tolerance from the Duke's daughter, to panic. What the maid feared most was that she would now be left with the guilt for the lady's condition on her conscience. Louise was selfish enough not to want such an end for herself in the estate, so she ran for help, not even noticing that Ariana was just pretending to be sick. None of the girls knew that the Duke of the North and his assistant had been watching them all this time. Isaac Perrine was especially sympathetic to Ariana, as he felt she did not deserve such treatment. But Cyrus did not share his friend's opinion, since it was this girl's father who could be responsible for the death of his parents. But that story was never proven, so the guy silently accumulated hatred inside himself. No matter how much Karha denied his interest, he became curious about this blue-haired lady. This is how the heroine attracted the attention of an important person, although she only wanted to protect herself. Her awakening was not easy, since the girl was partly not faking her ill condition. Ariana immediately noticed the changes that had happened to her, because before they had not called a doctor for her. All the relatives, headed by Kilra Bronte, who was the grandmother, gathered in the ladies' room, but only the maids allowed themselves to whisper anxiously at the sight of Ariana's condition. The doctor did everything he could, but it was not in his power to completely cure the Duke's exhausted daughter. Previously, the grandmother had no idea that her granddaughter was feeling so ill. Of course, Rachel didn't want to take responsibility, even though she personally humiliated her daughter all this time. Ariana understood that now was her only chance to prove her innocence to everyone. Rachel had a lot of experience in lying and eloquence, so she could talk anyone into talking. Unfortunately, Killier had rarely visited the estate lately, so she didn't know about the attitude towards Ariana. Madame didn't like what she saw, but she couldn't even imagine how things really were. So the heroine didn't wait any longer, because it was important for her to justify herself in the eyes of her grandmother. No one expected the blue-haired lady to talk again about not stealing anything, but Rachel was afraid of being disgraced in front of Killier, so she didn't want her daughter to speak. Louise knew best about what was happening. Having personally stolen the necklace to frame Ariana, the heroine was well aware of the punishment that hung over her, so she tried to avoid injustice. For the first time in a long time, her words made her grandmother think that something was going on in the estate. She had noticed something similar before due to the behavior of the maids, but she tried not to pay attention to anything. But now, Killier's status obliged him to look into the theft situation in order to find the culprit. Unbeknownst to the others, Ariana made every effort to point out the carefree Louise next to her. The assistant had never before encountered the Duke's timid daughter displaying so much courage, but the heroine was no longer the quiet girl she once was. She had learned to weave intrigues for the sake of survival. So all eyes were on Louise, who was sure that the lady would not be able to prove anything. But the maid's courage began to fade before her eyes when the other assistants began to search her. Although Louise was sure that the girls would not be able to find anything, her heart sank treacherously. She had no idea that the stolen necklace had been in her apron pocket all this time. The maid clearly remembered how she hid the jewelry in another place, which is why she remained so careless. This is how the heroine managed to take revenge on her assistant, who had been taking out her anger on her all this time. Now, no one will believe the maid who accused another man of stealing a precious piece of jewelry. What angered Killier most were the servants who could not perform their duties well. Louise had no choice but to turn to the lady who could save her. The last thing Rachel expected was to find herself in this situation because of Ariana, whom she didn't love. The worst thing was that Madame couldn't throw out the maid. Otherwise, rumors would spread. She knew that her daughter Helena would then be to blame for everything, which turned Louise against her older sister. So in this situation, the woman could only beg her mother-in-law to soften the punishment. The heroine had already heard that in the past, Rachel had repeatedly begged Killiera to marry her son. But the madam was adamant, as she did not like the status of the future bride to be too high. So in the end, Rachel suffered a cruel defeat, never getting a place in Jacob's heart. Under pressure from her father, she was forced to sell herself to Russell White, who had skillfully ruled the eastern lands for a long time. But after Ariana was born, the first thing the woman did was run back to the Bronte family. In her past life, the heroine constantly prayed for love, just like her beautiful mother. But now all the mother's words seemed strange to the lady, because she no longer sought love. The terrible events of her past life hardened the heart of the heroine, who wanted to take revenge on everyone. Just like last time, the Duke of the North and his assistant again quietly watched what was happening in the estate. Both guys were impressed by how well Ariana was able to stand up for herself in a difficult situation. What bothered Kiris most was that the girl's eyes revealed that she was an experienced and cruel person. So the more Karha watched this lady, the more he wanted to meet her in person. But they arrived on the mansion's territory secretly, so their presence could not be revealed. So it was not surprising that Isaac did not approve of the master's desire to quietly enter the estate. But when the Duke of the North made a decision, it was useless to try to dissuade him. That night, it wasn't only the handsome intruder from the north who was quietly creeping through the dark corridors of the estate. Ariana took advantage of the quiet of the night and crept cautiously into the empty kitchen in the separate wing. She still hadn't been fed properly, but the girl wasn't going to starve in this life either. The heroine had no idea why she had previously been so afraid of punishment from her relatives. Now she has taken her life into her own hands, no longer expecting love and support from anyone in the estate. Only such nighttime snacks saved the lady from exhaustion, because no one cared about her. But the Duke's daughter didn't expect that this time she wouldn't be able to enjoy her meal in peace. As soon as the lady began to eat, she heard an unfamiliar male voice, although she did not notice the steps. Panic overwhelmed the heroine, as she couldn't be seen in the kitchen at night. The guy who showed his face from the darkness seemed handsome and merciless to the lady at first glance. As soon as he snapped his fingers, frost magic illuminated everything for a short moment. So Ariana had no doubt that the real Duke of the North appeared before her. But the girl had no idea why this guy had followed her into the kitchen in the first place. A couple of minutes before this fateful meeting, the lady was just thinking about her future and past. She had already gotten used to the fact that no one was paying attention to her, and even began to rejoice about it. Most of all, the lady was afraid that her mother would sell her again to an aristocrat and use her. Rachel had long been making plans for her eldest daughter's marriage, as she wanted to strengthen her influence. But this time, Ariana planned to escape from the estate before her mother married her off. She did not want to experience again the terrible abuse that had already begun at the estate. That is why she needed the power of the Duke of the East so much, even though he did not interfere in his daughter's upbringing. But only he could help the girl escape, and this time the lady was going to cling to even such hope. This man always seemed cold and unfeeling to Ariana, so she was afraid of him. In the past, they saw each other only once, and even then, they couldn't even talk to each other. Then the heroine really wanted to get closer to Russell, but quickly realized that it was not worth doing. White's expression made it clear to the lady that he felt nothing but hatred towards her. But the lady did not hope for anything else, because she did not believe that anyone would love her. There was a constant silent political war going on between the dukes of the cardinal directions, so it was not surprising that White did not speak to his daughter, who lived on someone else's property. Since ancient times, there have been betrayals and deceptions between the dukes of the cardinal directions with the help of subordinates. Therefore, Ariana hoped that her father would accept her if she brought him the enemy's weaknesses. She wanted to get a confession from Russell so that no one could touch her again. Until then, the lady needed to remain quiet in order to survive and get to her father. But in one instant, the Duke of the North destroyed all the dreams of the lady who wanted to keep a low profile. The guy appeared so unexpectedly and at the wrong time, but he kept a sly smile on his face. But the heroine was in no mood for fun, since her life was suddenly under threat. She heard that Cyrus wanted to come, but she didn't think it would be so soon. Ariana hadn't met this guy in her past life, so she knew little about his character. But the appearance of the Northern Duke never ended up being a good sign for others. In the worst-case scenario, the girl could die again, but at his hands. Everything inside the heroine burned with indignation, because she had only just begun to get back on her feet. Rage and irritation drowned out the fear that arose in all people when meeting Cyrus. Karhi's face reflected genuine surprise, as for the first time, he was not shown any panic. The guy didn't expect that this quiet lady, who was being bullied, would speak to him so confidently. His beauty was unmistakable, so the stranger's identity became obvious to the heroine. What bothered Ariana most was that she didn't know the motives of the strange Duke of the North. No matter how hard the girl tried to maintain an outward defense, inside she was clenched with anxiety. While Cyrus remained just as calm and unperturbed in this situation, it was most advantageous for the lady to pretend that they had not actually met that night. But it was precisely this desire that the heroine only further attracted the attention of the curious Duke. Karka was used to girls either being afraid of him or trying their best to please him. But Ariana tried to move away, as the guy's eyes were drawing her into a bottomless abyss. Their bright red color reminded the heroine of the endless sea of blood that remained after the battles. She looked at her reflection in the water with horror, because she did not want such a cruel life. Miss could not even imagine what the Duke, whose eyes held such madness, had to endure. This state captivated the heroine so much that she didn't even notice how she reached out to the guy with her hands. The awakening was abrupt and unpleasant, as Cyrus took decisive action. Young Ariana amused the young Duke more and more with her strange behavior. Although the girl only dreamed of never talking to such a dangerous man again, the heroine's head was constantly filled with the thought that Karka could deal with her at any moment. But this time, the Duke pulled the lady towards him, not at all, because he wanted to harm her. It so happened that on this very night, the maids were sent to the kitchen to fetch food for Helena. The assistants had clearly only recently gotten out of bed due to the whims of their beloved daughter, Rachel. The girls were discussing the latest gossip in the estate, unaware that they were not alone. In this situation, the heroine was even grateful to the Duke for such a quick reaction. No matter how much she resisted being close to the guy, there was no other way out now. The maids were still desperately searching for chocolate in the kitchen, gradually approaching the shelter. More than anything in the world, Ariana was afraid that her assistants would find her in the closet with the Duke. But there was no rescue, since one of the maids still opened the doors to the utility room. Horror froze on the heroine's face. After this discovery, her whole life could have ended. But suddenly, the assistant simply walked past the guy and girl as if they didn't exist. Ariana couldn't have imagined such a development of events, even in her wildest dreams. The maid acted as if she really hadn't noticed, either the Duke's daughter or Kiris Karhu. This circumstance raised many questions in the lady, who had hardly encountered magic before. Cyrus didn't even think about hiding from the girl the fact that he had hidden it with the help of his magic. The guy himself would not want his secret presence in the estate to be revealed. Of course, the Duke could not help but be glad that the lady now had to help him. But Arena wasn't so easy to hook, because she was already living her second life. So the girl was in no hurry to thank the savior, because of whom she lingered in the kitchen for so long. From the outside, it might seem that Cyrus was flirting with the lady who interested him, but the heroine saw that the guy's eyes still remained just as cold and dangerous. She knew a lot about her family, as she was connected to Gerald in a past life. But the Duke named facts known to the girl. Although he had never been part of her family, the more the lady pushed Cyrus away from her, the more he pressed her to himself. The heroine's thoughts were completely confused, because she could not understand this man's motives. When he told her details about the Bronte family, Ariana tried to look surprised. But in fact, from her past life, the lady knew all the details about her mother's life. Rachel became pregnant too early for the second time, which enraged her father. But the woman had enough courage to fight for the life of the child she was going to love. But the Duke of the West, as an act of revenge, married off his daughter, forcing her to forget about the child. This is how Helena found herself among the common people, although her mother planned to take her away in the future. Rachel had been forced to bow her head all her life, which is why she had so much hatred left inside her. The only thing that brought her relief was her beloved husband, with whom she wanted to be from the very beginning. During the marriage, a third daughter was conceived, who was later named Vittoria Bronte. While Helena suffered from poverty for a long time, until her mother dared to take her away. All of this was a Bronte family secret, so the Duke was not allowed to know such details. The heroine had a hard time pretending that she was hearing this whole story of her family for the first time in her life. She was not allowed to get close to the Duke of the North, who remained an obscure figure in history. But for some reason, Cyrus did not want to let this lady go. Although he usually did not show interest in girls, all his attention was captured by the blue-haired Ariana, who stubbornly tried to stay away. All attempts to get closer were met with hostility by the heroine, because she did not even recognize her name. This only made the girl remind Cyrus more of the beast that was trapped and resisting. The desire to remain free was above all caution when dealing with the Duke of the North. So in the lady's eyes, the guy saw ice, which was so familiar to him from childhood. Ariana's face never left Karhi's mind, even as he carefully left the estate. For the first time in a long time, His entire consciousness was clouded by thoughts of another person. Of course, the faithful assistant did not miss the fact that the master had used magic in the estate. Isaac thought that the Duke would be much more careful in acting on enemy territory. And in the end, Cyrus almost revealed his presence due to his communication with the lady. But Karka did not regret his actions, since at that moment he could not act differently. Communication with Ariana proved to him that this girl could be useful in their search. For the first time in his life, Perenu found the Duke's train of thought so incomprehensible that it frightened him. The boy would have preferred that the master simply use torture, as they always did. But Cyrus was sure that Ariana could not be broken by brute force, since she was not afraid of him. Isaac's greatest fear was that the Duke would accidentally become attached to the daughter of their longtime enemy. But at the moment, Karha was capable of easily killing Ariana if she began to interfere. The next morning, Helena moved around her home estate with extreme caution. But her secrecy was not enough, as the younger sister still found the middle one. Vittoria always had a sweet smile, behind which hid cunning and deceit. And now the girl pretended to sympathize with Helena, who had recently suffered from her mother. But her beautiful appearance this time did not soften the anger of her sister, who was found guilty. It was Vittoria who suggested bringing Ariana some scraps, but she was not accused of anything. That's why Helena was full of resentment towards her sister, although they had always communicated amicably before. The youngest Bronte daughter was lucky, because the middle one could not stay offended for long, no matter how much pain she suffered. The sisters blamed all their failures on Ariana, whom their mother had brought from the east for some reason. That is why the girls stuck together as representatives of the western side. While Helena personally would like to get closer to the mysterious Duke of the North, she worked hard to find a portrait of the boy she was in love with. The middle daughter dreamed of the day when she would meet this powerful ruler in person. She had heard that the Duke of the North had promised to come, and she was looking forward to it. Vittoria did not share her sister's love, but she did not laugh at her for such feelings either. All her thoughts were filled with dreams of the banquet that would follow upon Cyrus's arrival in their domain. While Helena didn't care what would happen after the Duke of the North arrived, it was clear to the girls that the moment of yet another disgrace would come for their older sister at the banquet. All because Vittoria had no intention of sharing her beautiful outfits with Ariana. But this reluctance gave Helena the idea of how to make her older sister's life even worse. While the heroine had no idea that the sisters were planning another dirty trick, she thought only about Kark, who had disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared before her. The lady never managed to figure out what exactly this dangerous guy wanted on their territory. Ariana was used to the fact that the future was known to her, but the Duke ruined all her plans. She remembered that in a couple of days, there would be a grand banquet celebration event. This is all because Helena will soon be introduced to society as one of the aristocrats of society. For this reason, the heroine had to take measures to avoid another disgrace. She even dared to leave the room, although her mother strictly forbade her to do so. Ariana knew she had little time, as Helena was already busy preparing for the event. The blue-haired lady did not want her first public appearance to take place on that particular day. She relished every moment of freedom she could win from her cruel family. Such walks at least somewhat eased the heroine's condition, as she was tired of sitting locked up. Only this time, the girl was unable to keep her wanderings around the estate a secret. The maids were too quick to inform Rachel that Ariana had left the room. The woman was furious that the young lady had never learned to obey her. She was ready to torment her unloved daughter day and night, just to achieve obedience. In a past life, the heroine would have calmly endured all the insults from her mother, whose love she was trying to earn. But now Ariana's eyes were shining with the fire of defiance, because she did not bow her head before her mother. This only made the woman even more angry, as she would have preferred to kill the girl if it weren't for the chance to make money off of her. Everything about Ariana's face reminded Rachel of the Duke of the East, whom she hated most of all. Therefore, Madame would never have been able to show her daughter even a drop of love and understanding. All the plaintive words of the daughter only caused more anger and fury inside Bronte's wife. This was not the first time the heroine had suffered such beatings, so she was physically prepared for them. The girl decided for herself that she would never again try to win her mother's love. After numerous beatings, Ariana did not believe that anyone in the family could become close to her. It was all because she was too much like her father, whom Rachel never loved. The woman brought her daughter with her many years ago, only because the Duke of the West himself ordered her to do so. So now she couldn't look at the lady she wanted to send away as quickly as possible without hatred. But at that moment, the torture was stopped by a sudden change in the weather, which broke out into hail. Rachel was afraid for her appearance, because she had to receive people from high society. So she quickly fled to the estate, but left her daughter outside to freeze in the hail. Even without her mother's order, the heroine had no desire to follow her into the room. What Ariana didn't expect was the appearance of a man who suddenly came to her aid. It so happened that the Duke of the North was nearby and could not silently watch the beating. In fact, with her actions, the heroine tested her mother's humanity for the last time. And now she was finally convinced that she shouldn't have reached out to this woman. Just when the lady was thinking that she would use any chance to save herself, the Duke appeared. The girl had no doubt that it was Cyrus who had spoiled the weather with his magic. In this whole situation, the guy was only interested in why Ariana was provoking her mother. He was becoming increasingly fascinated by the strange behavior of the girl, who did not show fear in front of him. So the guy couldn't let go of the lady, who was already heading towards the estate. The heroine froze in place when she heard that the Duke could not think of what to call her. She didn't expect Cyrus to follow the rules that had been laid down recently so closely. Ariana remembered well the moment when she lost her temper, and therefore asked not to be identified by her status. Apparently, her facial expression then told Karha that it was better not to argue in such situations. However, this did not stop the Duke from wanting to give unnecessary advice to his friend. In the end, Ariana had to let the guy call her by her first name, just to get him to leave her alone. The lady could not have imagined that the young man's face would light up with a pleasant smile after her words. No matter how stony the heroine's heart was, she was unable to ignore such beauty. So the lady's heart sank treacherously. Although she tried to hide her emotions, it turned out that the guy wanted to talk about the girl's facial expression all this time. Cyrus clearly saw in Ariana's eyes the desire for revenge and killing, even though she tried to appear nice. The heroine had no idea that all this time she had been frightening everyone around her with her internal struggle. This little piece of advice was very useful for survival, because Miss could give herself away. But even after help from Cyrus, the lady did not plan to show trust in him. So this time, she managed to quickly run away from the guy who wanted to continue the conversation. The Duke understood that his approach to the estate was dangerous, so he remained where he was. As usual, the assistant appeared nearby to remind the gentleman of his wrong actions. They both agreed that Ariana seemed too mature for her young age. Meanwhile, the heroine once again examined her face more closely, which she had not looked after before. The girl completely forgot that she was not allowed to show any changes inside outwardly. So from now on, the lady had to constantly smile at everyone around her, as she had done before. Gradually, Miss improved her acting skills, but she was far from the skills of her relatives. Vittoria was the best at pretending to be a nice girl when she was communicating with the unloved Ariana. And this time, upon seeing her older sister, the lady beamed with a joyful smile, as if she had been waiting for her. In her past life, the heroine believed that Vittoria was always on her side in this family. Too late, Ariana realized that it was actually this girl who was ruining her life. The youngest daughter of the Bronte family possessed incredible charm, which she used so skillfully. That is why she was also to blame for her sister's death, although she did not regret what happened at that moment. Her feigned participation poisoned the heroine's life every time, but she had not noticed it before. Only now has Ariana gained the sense not to show her sister her true emotions. But it turned out that Vittoria was much more observant than the heroine remembered her to be. The girl didn't expect that her sister would notice the unnaturalness in her behavior so quickly. The only thing that saved the lady was that there had been recent events that would have made anyone nervous. So the younger one only tried once again to calm the older one in order to bind her to herself. But this time, Ariana clearly felt like she was the one in charge in this relationship. In her past life, the heroine always obeyed Vittoria, considering her almost a goddess. Although they grew up on the same estate, the difference between the girls was noticeable to the naked eye. But now Ariana had every opportunity to take revenge on her naive younger sister. Until Vittoria gained experience, the lady had to play the role of an obedient sister next to her. The heroine remembered well that she should not have listened to Vittoria's advice about etiquette. The girl only pretended to be trying to tell her older sister about table manners. But in reality, she was cruelly lying to Ariana and telling her wrong actions while eating. All this was done to present Rachel's eldest daughter in an unflattering light in society. But the nuance was that the heroine no longer believed a single word from her younger sister. Now Vittoria was briefly preparing Ariana for the banquet, happy that she was repeating everything after her. However, a cunning plan had already matured in the heroine's head on how to turn everything to her advantage. Until now, because of her terrible past, the girl had nightmares about those events every night. Most of all, the lady was worried about the banquet, at which she was cruelly disgraced in front of everyone. At that time, all the aristocrats only discussed the strange actions of the daughter of the Duke of the East from the sidelines. But Ariana sincerely tried to achieve love and acceptance from her family and adults. But it all ended in shameful and public humiliation, because the lady did not know the rules of behavior in society. Although all this was in the past, the heroine could not get those events out of her head. All these dreams were a signal to the girl that she should remain just as careful. She didn't show her tears to anyone, but when she was alone, she allowed herself to indulge in emotions. At the banquet last year, Vittoria made a laughingstock of Ariana, and the lady remembered it forever. But now the heroine was going to do everything possible to win the event. She knew that if she caught the attention of Duchess Juliana Rabenta, everything would change. So the lady's future directly depended on her actions, which could again turn out sad. But Ariana wasn't going to die because of her relatives who never gave her love. Meanwhile, carriages carrying aristocrats had already begun to arrive at the Bronte family estate for the banquet. Isaac watched this action from the sidelines, as his master had no intention of joining the festivities. The assistant himself would not be opposed to Cyrus impressing everyone with his appearance in front of the people. But Karha did not want to be a puppet at the behest of others, and therefore did not take part in the banquet. Perrin didn't expect any other answer from Cyrus, who always preferred to observe secretly from the sidelines. He had long since noticed that all the attention of the Duke of the North was now focused on young Ariana. Karka deliberately took a good observation position so that he could constantly see the girl's room. So he was able to notice that the lady stubbornly refused to wear a dress that looked extremely strange for a banquet. The Duke liked the fact that the lady carefully looked after her image, although no one respected her. A few hours later, all preparations for the opening of the banquet at the Bronte estate were completed. As soon as Juliana, who was one of the important guests of the event, arrived, people surrounded her. Rachel had been waiting for a long time for an opportunity to get at least a little closer to this woman. That's why she brought her daughters in advance, because they could be married to someone from Madame's family. Helena tried harder than anyone else to attract the attention of Duchess Rabenta, because she was soon to go out into society. The girl specifically invited Ariana so that she could look much better next to her. Only the daughter forgot to warn Rachel that the older lady would also come to the event. As soon as the heroine appeared, rumors from the aristocrats immediately began to spread throughout the ball. The whole point was that Ariana managed to maintain dignity in her look, despite wearing an awful dress. The lady didn't even think about being embarrassed about her appearance, because she wanted to show everyone what her relatives had driven her to. That's why Ariana had a bright smile on her face, because this time she didn't forget to control her emotions. Rachel was instantly furious at the sight of her eldest daughter, who was dressed up like that for the banquet. She realized that it was already too late to hide the girl from prying eyes. The hardest part of the situation for Rachel was having to keep up a mask of emotion. Bronte's wife wasn't the only one shocked by Ariana's appearance at the event. Vittoria was confident that the eldest would wear the very dress that she had prepared for her in advance. In the end, the girl could not be considered a laughingstock because she evoked pity in everyone around her. Bronte's youngest daughter knew she urgently needed to get Ariana out of the banquet hall, but Helena decided to take advantage of her ugly sister to look good in comparison. This behavior of the sister only played into the heroine's hands, which attracted a lot of attention from the outside. The aristocrats watched in horror as the only girl wore such a dress. No matter how hard Rachel tried, she couldn't hint at getting her daughter out of the banquet hall. The heroine pretended not to understand anything and continued to show the injuries from the beatings. These terrible bruises did not hide from the eyes of Rabenta, who did not forgive such behavior. Vittoria quickly noticed that her mother needed help in covering up the abuse of her sister. She knew how to play brilliantly in public, touching everyone with her innocence and beauty. But this time, Ariana easily got around her sister, as she knew in advance about all the words of her relatives. This is how the heroine achieved the fact that now all the aristocrats thought only about her condition, and the family could do nothing about the condemnation that poured down on them from the outside. Ariana wasn't afraid of losing her reputation, which is why she acted so boldly at that moment. In the end, the girl's plan was crowned with success, because the aristocrats turned against Bronte. None of the banquet hosts expected that they would be blamed for the Duke's daughter's condition. While the heroine didn't even need to pretend to be weak, because she was truly hungry. People from high society were so kind that they could not ignore the hungry miss. This is how Helena remained out of the spotlight, even though this event was meant for her. Everything inside the girl was seething with anger, because everyone began to think only about Ariana. The middle daughter was sure that her beauty would outshine everyone at this banquet, but this did not happen. According to Vittoria's plan, Ariana was to become a laughingstock for the aristocrats around her. And in the end, the fair-haired lady had to watch as her rival was praised from all sides. Vittoria was most frightened when she noticed that Ariana was suddenly offered tea with concern. Only she knew that now the girl would attract even more attention from the aristocrats. People were indeed surprised by the loud way in which the lady drank her tea. None of them expected that the manners of the Duke's eldest daughter would be so terrible. While the heroine successfully made a surprised face, because Vittoria showed her this method, Bronte's youngest daughter realized too late that all the blame would now be shifted onto her. This is how skillfully Ariana dealt with all the stupid ridicule her younger sister made towards her. People refused to believe until the very end that the blue-haired lady had been treated so badly. Only the Duchess, who was the most important guest at the banquet, could prevent all the gossip. It was her words that Rachel was afraid of, because she understood that there was a big difference in status between them. After everything he saw, Robenta had an extremely bad impression of the Bronte family. It was this kind of disapproval that Rachel, who was used to begging for approval, feared most in life. From now on, the Duchess had no trust in the woman who had brought her daughter to such a state. That's how easily Rachel lost the opportunity to become closer to Robenta, which she had been betting so much on. This situation hit hard the woman, who always strived for a higher status. But now such a thing was impossible, since Robenta had turned away from her forever. Instead, all of Madame's attention was focused on the heroine, which is what the lady had originally wanted. Juliana has always tried to support young girls who found themselves in difficult situations, so she invited Ariana to her banquet in the hope that the family would take this lady in. In the end, the whole event ended sadly, because the terrible truth about Bronte was revealed. The heroine was not surprised when they once again took physical revenge on her for all the humiliation at the banquet. Although the lady had suffered greatly, she no longer felt any fear of her foolish relatives. Now her mother was tied hand and foot, because the Duchess supported only Ariana. But before, the lady was afraid that if she told the truth about her family, no one would believe her. However, it all ended with the destruction of Bronte's reputation, because everyone sympathized with the heroine. So Ariana once again wondered why she needed the love of such a family at all. She was used to the darkness, so she didn't even think about shedding tears, because she was locked in a dungeon. But what came as a surprise to the lady was that she heard a familiar voice outside the bars. For the young Duke of the North, there was no place he could not easily reach. What the boy couldn't understand was why Rachel was so desperate to destroy her daughter. Ariana's answer was extremely calm, because she believed that she was simply unlucky to be born into such a family. Karka was deeply shocked by the logic of the girl, who didn't even try to improve relations with her family. This circumstance once again proved to the guy how special the girl could be considered. From the outside, he could clearly see how wary she remained at that moment. The Duke still couldn't understand where this young lady's anxiety and fear of people came from. It always seemed to him that all aristocrats were well brought up from childhood. But for such a young girl, Ariana thought too much about how to change her future. This is what reminded Cyrus of himself, because once upon a time, the guy had to survive in spite of everyone. Suddenly, the girl was overcome with loud laughter, because the Duke's confused face seemed funny to her. The heroine herself did not notice how much she was transformed in those moments when she smiled at the people around her. Karka clearly didn't expect his interlocutor to be able to display such sincere emotions in a cold dungeon. The longer the gentleman communicated with the lady, the more he became drawn into the girl's personality. And now the guy wanted to see tears on her face to make sure that the miss remained alive. It was no problem for Ariana to fulfill such a strange request, because the Duke often helped her out. In this life, she quickly learned to play with emotions, so she could portray anything. This trait surprised Cyrus the most, although he had long been accustomed to the insincerity of the people around him. The guy still planned to find the information he needed with Ariana's help, even though he didn't trust her. Therefore, the girl was at a loss as to what the Duke of the North really wanted from her. The fact that the lady didn't show fear on her face made Karhu feel sympathy for her. The only thing that was hard for Ariana to cope with was hunger, which the guy eventually figured out. For the first time, the heroine was glad that it was dark in the dungeon, and the Duke could not see her red face. She was confident that she would survive even such a difficult test, because she had reasons to survive. No matter how much Cyrus wanted to help the girl, he was powerless when she herself pushed away his help. Ariana was so used to relying only on herself that she did not believe the words of the caring Duke of the North. And so the lady was left all alone in the middle of a cold dungeon, which she had already experienced before. In part, the heroine was even glad of such solitude because the actions of young Kirus were stressing her out. The only thing that made the lady happy was that the guy was clearly not on Rachel's side, so he could help her in the future. Ariana was afraid that her path would once again collide with the guy who sent her on difficult missions. In such a situation, the girl will be powerless, because she will try to do everything to survive. That's why the girl didn't trust anyone around her, since only she could be responsible for her life. The heroine was afraid more than anything in the world of trusting the wrong person and ultimately dying again. So she was going to complete her difficult journey on her own, no matter how difficult it might be. But the lady did not know that Cyrus continued to secretly watch her from the side. After talking with the lady, the guy became completely convinced that she was going to escape from the estate. Her face reminded him of a person who had long been hardened in numerous battles. Previously, the Duke of the North was interested in this girl only because she was one of his enemies. Ariana has been a link between the Dukes of the East and the West since childhood. Cyrus had hoped for the lady's high status, but it turned out that everyone was just using her. And only the girl's eyes said that this would not continue for the rest of her life. So Karha still wondered who the Duke's young daughter's revenge was aimed at. It hurt him to realize that Ariana reminded him so much of himself in the past. Many years ago, one of the Dukes treated a boy cruelly, killing his entire family. Cyrus survived only because he was able to hide in the cold winter forest at that moment. At that moment, pain was tearing him apart from the inside, but the boy was not going to give himself up to the enemy. His whole body begged for mercy, but the child remained determined to save himself and escape. It was then that he saw his gaze, which was filled with hatred and defiance. And Ariana's eyes reminded the Duke of himself at the time when his loved ones were brutally killed. In all the world, no one could understand the feelings of a heroine betrayed by people better than Kirus. Although the guy didn't know the whole truth about the girl, he saw that there was something serious hidden behind her emotions. So he was interested in staying close to Ariana to follow her development. No one could tell the Duke of the North what to do if he had a plan. He understood perfectly well that the blue-haired lady was too unstable an element. In any other situation, Cyrus would have definitely destroyed such a problematic person. But for some reason, he didn't want to harm the girl who had managed to interest him. The Duke had not yet realized how valuable the lady was to him, but it was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, at the estate, Vittoria was venting her anger on the poor maids. The assistants were punished because they were unable to fulfill all the demands of the young lady. And as a result, Vittoria saw with her own eyes how Ariana secretly laughed at her. But the worst thing was that even Helena blamed her younger sister for everything, that she had disgraced her. But the blonde always tried to do everything to make sure that people around her only said good things about her. Their quarrel immediately attracted the attention of Rachel, who hated noise in the estate. The woman did not approve of such behavior between sisters, who were supposed to be role models. Vittoria hoped that at least her own mother would take her side in this sad situation. But Rachel's gaze was full of coldness towards her daughter, who was not the most beloved. For the first time in her life, the girl felt lonely as her mother turned away from her. This hit the fair-haired lady the hardest, as she had too high an opinion of herself. Vittoria couldn't find an answer to the question of why Rachel loved Helena so much. She was afraid that in her mother's eyes, Ariana would take the place of the youngest daughter in the future. And then the same cold dungeon where her older sister sat will await the fair-haired lady. This future was so hateful to Vittoria that furious emotions tore her apart from within. She could barely stand on her feet, and only her strength of spirit allowed her not to fall in front of the maids. The lady was finally convinced that Ariana was the cause of all her troubles. Vittoria noticed that her sister had changed, but she still couldn't find an explanation for it. This is because few people could imagine that the heroine was living her second life. So the girl began to be much more careful about what was happening within the dungeon. She heard clearly how 2 maids were punished because they did not obey Vittoria. No matter how much the assistants begged for forgiveness, all their words were drowned out by the cruelty of Rachel's daughter. So the girls had to share the fate of the heroine, who was sitting in prison more than once. Ariana remembered that in the past, Vittoria had even been kind to the maids in order to maintain her status. But now the pressure was too much for the young lady, who found herself at fault for everything. It was a small victory for the blue-haired miss. Even though she was in a bad position, she heard the sobs of the maids, but at least they were not completely alone in the dungeon. While it was much more difficult for the heroine to maintain body heat in such cold, in her past life, the girl constantly had dreams about her own father coming to pick her up. He would suddenly burst into the dungeon for his tired daughter, promising to take her with him. The lady's heart sank with joy every time, because she missed the warmth and care so much. So Ariana was completely immersed in an illusion that was never actually destined to come true. And this time, in her dream, the heroine firmly rejected the love that the Duke of the East offered her. The lady no longer wanted to believe that somewhere in another part of the empire, someone had been waiting for her for a long time. So the father's face crumbled to dust before the girl who did not believe in his confessions and pleas. Ariana has long since realized that only she can save her future from a sad end. This time, waking up from sleep was a little more pleasant, due to the aroma of warm bread nearby. While the lady was sleeping, the Duke could not keep away, and so he brought her some food. Although the heroine did not ask for such a favor, her heart filled with gratitude to the guy. No matter how cold the Duke of the North seemed, for some reason, he showed warmth towards the girl. The guy himself no longer considered his actions a favor, since the lady's survival was important to him. But Ariana didn't trust anyone, and Cyrus was no exception in her difficult life. The more the guy tried to get closer, the more the girl stubbornly pushed him away. And this time, bloody images instantly appeared before the face of the traumatized heroine. It seemed to her that behind every good deed of the Duke, there was always a cunning calculation. That's why Ariana closed her heart to the guy who sincerely cared about her at that moment. The lady thought it would be much more logical if the Duke helped someone who was truly in need. It didn't escape Kyrus's notice that Miss had carefully hinted to him about her sister-in-love. Karha had long known that Helena had hung a portrait with his face in her room. But the heroine didn't know that this circumstance infuriated the cold-blooded Duke of the North to the point of madness. It was Ariana who once helped her sister with the search for the portrait, so she was partly to blame. But for some reason, the girl wasn't afraid that she might be punished by the guy. His smile was quite capable of comforting any girl who had succumbed to anxiety and sadness. That is why the Duke was so surprised at the sight of Ariana that she remained calm and unsociable. Cyrus was accustomed to the attention of girls who quickly gave him their hearts, and the heroine did not deny the fact that the Duke of the North had an incredibly handsome appearance. All Karha wanted to know at that moment was whether the heart of the lady next to him was beating faster. His seduction reached its maximum level, and all for the sake of this cold and determined girl. Only one heroine was unable to reciprocate the Duke's feelings, and he liked her. Meanwhile, at the estate, Rachel's husband was furious at everything his wife had done. The man would never have thought that Madame would let Ariana into an important banquet with aristocrats. This idea was not the woman's, but she took upon herself all the blame for her youngest daughter. Jacob was clearly incapable of thinking logically after his family's disgrace, and Rachel watched with pain as her husband, whom she had loved dearly all her life, suffered. Madame urgently needed a plan that would restore their family's good reputation. She was ready to make any sacrifice, if only Jacob would smile happily at her again. This is how the desire to kill her own daughter, who became a hindrance, was born in Rachel's head. The heroine had no idea that her actions only hastened the approach of death. She continued to talk to the Duke, not understanding why he did not leave. It was already beginning to seem to Cyrus that only with this lady could he freely talk about anything. In the end, the guy got the long-awaited smile from Ariana, who accidentally relaxed. This emotion impressed the Duke so much that he even forgot about his jokes about the young lady. Karka honestly admitted to the heroine that her smile could very well become a real weapon. Cyrus believed that Ariana's beauty was not inferior to his own, but she did not take advantage of this. The guy's compliments did not reach the girl's heart, but she was still happy with them. At that moment, by chance, peace was finally restored between the two friends. As much as the Duke was sorry to leave the lady alone, it was time for him to leave the dungeon. So Miss didn't even notice how Cyrus, with the help of magic, disappeared into thin air. The heroine still couldn't get used to how unexpectedly the guy appeared and disappeared. She remembered that he could easily just become invisible and still watch her. Kyrus's motives still bothered Ariana, who was not used to kindness from others. Even warm bread and water from Karhi did not please the girl, who was afraid of becoming indebted to him. So Miss did not accept any gifts from her friend, even though she felt bad. The lady turned out to be right, since the Duke only hid his presence in the dungeon from her eyes. He sincerely did not understand why the lady was so stubborn when she could have eased her condition. As the ruler of the North, Cyrus had many matters that required immediate resolution. His assistants always waited patiently for the master, who had not given any orders recently. Captain Lewis and her second-in-command, Noah, have always been the best at carrying out the Duke of the North's orders, so Karha never doubted that he could entrust them with the most difficult tasks. This was because even the faithful Isaac would periodically fall into a state of rest, something everyone else knew about. That's why Cyrus most often resorted to the help of reliable knights in the form of Lewis and Noah. True, this time the Duke was in no hurry to return to the north, as his assistants expected of him. Unlike Isaac, these two always silently accepted all decisions from the young master. So Cyrus didn't expect that the knights would dare to blame Bronte's eldest daughter for everything. It turned out that such rumors had spread among them because of the talkative Isaac. At first, Noah didn't even realize that with such words, he had brought down upon himself the full wrath of the Duke of the North. What Karka disliked most was when his assistants discussed his actions behind his back. Luckily for her friend, Lewis knew exactly how to avoid all the wrath of the emotional Duke of the North. So soon, Cyrus himself turned his attention to the Bronte estate, which was nearby. A few days later, the heroine was finally released from her starving confinement in the dungeon. At that time, the girl did not yet know that the Duke had decided to stay nearby for about a week. But instead, Ariana was greeted by her beautiful younger sister with a sweet smile on her face. Vittoria didn't miss a single opportunity to throw dust in the eyes of her unloved elder. So the heroine had to endure her sister's company, although she would have preferred solitude again. During the time the lady spent in the dungeon, she forgot how attentive Vittoria could be. The blonde kept a smile on her face, but all her actions were full of feigned concern. So Ariana had to pretend to be grateful to the younger one for trying to help. Although in reality, the girl could barely restrain herself from pushing away the unpleasant relative. In this life, the blue-haired lady was better at hiding her true emotions from everyone. So young Vittoria thought that she was able to deceive her stupid older sister. But in reality, this was not so. But the heroine could not reveal all her knowledge. As soon as the girl entered the room, she heard one of the maids approaching. However, Ariana had never seen this assistant before in the estate, which noticeably surprised her. Only a few people knew that it was Lewis, who introduced herself as Rosalind. The incredible obedience of the new maid immediately caught the eye of the attentive heroine. The lady couldn't help but take advantage of this, as she was still planning to escape. She did not feel sorry for any of the decorations that were brought purely for the sake of decency. Rosaline listened surprisingly attentively to Mrs. request that she find the merchant. As soon as her assistant left to carry out the task, Ariana turned her attention to the food. This time, they brought her not rotten scraps, but delicious and filling dishes from the best chef in the estate. But before, she had been told that even the most terrible food would be too good for her. But the heroine's other actions led to her future changing for the better. However, this did not mean that Ariana would abandon all thoughts of escaping from her native estate. Instead, the lady planned to sell all the expensive jewelry that her sisters had brought her. Only with this would Ariana have the money to go to her biological father. The heroine had time to make sure that only she was able to take care of her well-being. Of course, the time before the escape could not pass without incident, because the lady did not live alone. So once again, she had to communicate with relatives whom she met in the corridor. Each time, Ariana had no idea what to expect from her obsessive and cunning mother. The woman did not hesitate to use everyone around her to achieve her goals. The heroine was smart enough to silently accept Rachel's false care, which she did not need at all. Although the woman's face was filled with kindness for the first time in a long time, Ariana didn't believe her. She was unable to forget all the horrors that Rachel had caused her in her past life. So the heroine only outwardly feigned submission, while inside she was burning with hatred. She didn't even think about accepting any help from her relatives, because she no longer needed it. The miss dared to walk around the estate only because she had such a meeting with the merchant. Rosalind arranged everything in the best possible way, and no one found out why Ariana suddenly headed into the forest. Although the lady did not have time to trust the maid, she began to respect her a little. Thanks to Rosalind's efforts, trading with the invited merchant was extremely successful for the heroine. What pleased Ariana most was the small dagger, which could be a good means of self-defense. In addition, she negotiated a good supply of money from the merchant, so she could soon escape. The only question that remained was what the lady should do with the maid who had helped her so much. In fact, Lewis's job was to undercover keep an eye on the daughter of the Duke of the East. That is why she overcame all of Ariana's mistrust, of which there was a lot in the lady. The knight commander had a good mind, so she easily found arguments for the girl. Therefore, the heroine soon became convinced that the new assistant could be trusted. She clearly remembered that in her past life, she had no one like the obedient Rosalind. This meant that the lady's actions were already bearing fruit and were successfully influencing changes in the future. Miss was accustomed to using those people who could be useful in the implementation of her plans. She didn't expect much from the maid when she asked her to hide her money in a safe bank. But it turned out that the assistant did everything at the highest level because she chose the right branch. Ariana still wondered where Rosalind had come from, whose hands betrayed her as a difficult servant. What surprised Miss most was that the assistant's actions gave the feeling that they were her hands. For the first time in 2 lives, the heroine received a token, which was the key to her bank account. Ariana had never had her own money before, so this was a valuable event for her. So, the assistant's efforts led to the heroine now being able to organize an escape. Now, the lady only had to find useful information for the Duke of the East. This was the only way Ariana could ensure a peaceful life for herself on her father's property. She didn't know that her actions had affected Rachel, who decided to act much earlier. To do this, the woman went to the slums of the city, where aristocrats usually did not set foot. She quickly found the best mercenary who was ready to take on such a crime. Of course, Rachel had to pay the man generously because it concerned harm to her daughter. Madame could no longer bear Ariana's presence in the house, which was collapsing because of her. So she personally ordered a mercenary to get rid of her own daughter forever. The man had already heard that the blue-haired lady had started causing problems at home. But no matter how sorry he felt for her, he did not dare disobey a representative of the Bronte family. The heroine immediately noticed how her life had changed over the past few days. Apart from the help from the beautiful maid, she also began to eat properly. The lady increasingly wondered how long this strange lull would last. All the events in the estate took place behind her back, and no one was bothering the girl now. For now, Ariana took all the care of her assistant for granted, although she did not trust her completely. But Rosaline behaved so well that she did not arouse any suspicion during the day. The girl was determined to help the young lady in any matter, which was evident in her entire posture. So it was easy for the lady to bribe the maid, who always remained on her side. And today, the heroine needed Rosalind to lie to everyone that they were together. Since Ariana generously rewarded her assistant, she had no problem fulfilling even the strangest requests. The heroine prepared herself this way because her mother, for some reason, called her to her place for the first time. So Rosalind was given some strange demands, which the maid promised to fulfill. The lady herself headed towards Rachel, fully aware that there was some kind of catch behind her conversation. The mother never invited her daughter to her place just like that, because she sincerely hated her. But today, for some reason, the woman wanted to personally put makeup on Ariana as a sign of their reconciliation. Such a ritual between mother and daughter always signified a trusting and warm relationship. But Rachel was filled with bloodlust, even as she gently touched the daughter of the East's face. All the time, the lady felt as if her mother was about to personally end her life right there on this spot. However, she endured the strange makeup ritual because she did not want to reveal her knowledge. Ariana didn't like the kindness from her mother at all, from whom she expected only bad things, and the request from Madame was not long in coming, because she needed her daughter to go to the gazebo. The lady had no reason to refuse this strange task from her mother, but inside, Ariana felt that this was where the very same catch would await her. She never had any illusions that Rachel would suddenly change her attitude, so the heroine remained wary throughout her entire journey to the gazebo. Trouble didn't take long to arise, as Miss heard footsteps behind her, but she didn't expect to see a mercenary known for his bloodthirstiness and cunning. The guy was clearly ordered to do more than just talk to the Duke's daughter, who was causing problems. And for this occasion, Ariana acquired a dagger, although her powers were not equal to those of her opponent. During her past life, the girl learned to protect herself, even if it was for a short time. Now, the lady's only hope for salvation was that the mercenary would agree to a bribe. She could pay this man twice as much as her mother to make him go away quietly. But Ariana had no idea that Rachel's plan was much more cunning than she could have imagined. The woman specially gathered noble ladies in advance, whose opinions were important in society. She was going to lead them to the very gazebo near which Ariana was now standing with the mercenary. All because the man just needed to spend time alone with the daughter of the Duke of the East. And no normal guy can refuse the opportunity to spend some time alone with an aristocrat. So all of the heroine's plans quickly failed, because she was much weaker than the powerful mercenary. The man had long harbored hatred for such ladies, and now he had the opportunity to take revenge. Quite quickly, Ariana ran out of strength to resist, no matter how hard she tried. But suddenly, something happened that was not part of either the girls' or the mercenary's plans. His head was separated from his body by the strong hands of the man who interfered with the man's plans. It turned out to be the Duke of the North, who was keeping an eye on Ariana out of curiosity today. Cyrus could not stand aside when he saw what almost happened to his enemy's daughter. The heroine didn't even think to count on the help of her friend, but his appearance turned out to be very convenient. The lady had no idea what she would have done if the Duke had not helped her once again. His face remained just as serene, even though he had just killed a man. So Ariana hid the fact that inside she was shaking with incredible fear. Karha had long since gotten used to the fact that ladies always fainted at the sight of dead people nearby. So the Duke's daughter once again amazed him with her calm behavior, despite the defeated mercenary. The lady truly hoped that her efforts, along with the dagger, would be enough. But the reality was much more frightening, because the girl was still young and inexperienced. Although she was not afraid to stain her hands with blood, physically the lady was far inferior to any man. The Duke did not expect that the quiet aristocrat would have such a strong inner core. Ariana acted as if she had already encountered death many times, even though she lived locked up in the estate. The girl managed to think through many little things in advance that others would not even think about. And now it seemed as if she had accidentally dropped the handkerchief. But this was one of the key details of her plan. Vittoria's name on the handkerchief suggested to the Duke that it would be better to leave the item at the crime scene. Now it was up to Cyrus, since he had gotten involved in this matter, to help Ariana. So he ordered his assistant to bring guards as quickly as possible to investigate the murder. Meanwhile, Vittoria ran as fast as she could to the gazebo, as she had recently received a letter from her mother. The girl had no idea why Rachel hadn't personally invited her to meet the aristocrats. But what surprised Madame most of all was the sight of her daughter, since she had not called her at all. The fair-haired lady had no idea that her letter was not written by her mother at all. So the woman was only angry at her daughter for violating her request to stay on the estate. This behavior of her mother surprised Vittoria so much that she expected a completely different result. In fact, all the other ladies were not opposed to Bronte's daughter joining them. But this was not part of the plans of the woman, who had thought out the entire walk down to the last detail. She paid most attention to the aristocrat, who was difficult to invite to tea. Bronte's wife's plan was to lead the noble ladies to the gazebo, where Ariana and the mercenary were supposed to be. In this way, Rachel intended to bring about her daughter's downfall in the eyes of all high society. No lady was allowed to bring unknown men into the house, so the girl would not be listened to. And it would have been easy for Rachel to pretend that she was grief-stricken and didn't want to show her daughter to anyone. So the woman was eagerly awaiting the moment when everyone would see Ariana in the arms of the mercenary. She planned everything so carefully that she had no doubt in the success of her insidious plan. But the faces of the aristocrats suddenly reflected fear, instead of surprise and hostility towards the situation. Rachel never imagined that she would find only a long-dead mercenary inside the gazebo. His head and body lay in the same place where the Duke of the North had deliberately left them. At exactly that moment, the investigator appeared near the gazebo, having arrived in response to a report. His appearance left the woman with no doubt that a real murder had taken place. What bothered Rachel most was that the guards appeared at a time when Ariana was not visible. The presence of the chief investigator himself made it clear to Madame that everything had not gone according to her plan. It was already enough that the mercenary she hired somehow ended up dead in the middle of the gazebo. But the horrors in the aristocrat's life did not end there, as the guards quickly found important evidence. Rachel personally gave Vittoria many things that the girl used with pleasure. So at first glance, she recognized the scarf with her daughter's name on it, which she had recently brought from the seamstress. This is how the charge of murder fell on the youngest daughter of the famous Bronte family. The trap that the heroine had been preparing for so long and so carefully finally slammed shut with a bang. In fact, the girl couldn't even imagine that she would be so lucky with Vittoria's personalized scarf. She began to act only because she knew all her mother's habits well from her past life. That's why Ariana was ready from the very morning and used the right products at the right time. Now, all she had to do was find those very letters from Rachel to the Duke of the West that would please Russell White. This information was supposed to be the key to the girl's freedom from the oppression and abuse of her family. The most difficult thing for the heroine now was to find those very letters that her mother had hidden somewhere among her things. She didn't have much time to explore all of evil Rachel's many outfits. But this time, luck was on the lady's side, because in one of the scarves, she quickly felt something that looked like letters. Finally, the opportunity to impress her own father no longer seemed so illusory to the heroine. But once again, the lady was not alone, because the Duke of the North had secretly followed her here too. This time, Kiris's behavior interfered with Ariana's plans to quietly steal her mother's letters. As usual, Karha amazed the girl with his ability to appear next to her at the most unexpected moments. And the lady could no longer be rude to the man who had recently saved her life in the gazebo. To the heroine's surprise, the Duke quickly realized that she was planning to escape from the estate. Although Cyrus gave the impression of being an indifferent person, he always remained attentive. So Miss couldn't turn this guy from a friend into an enemy, because she would definitely lose to him. From the very morning, Ariana really did everything to successfully escape in the future, and she started with a letter for Vittoria. This is precisely why she needed Rosalind's support, who obediently covered for her mistress in everything. Since the younger sister eventually showed up near the gazebo, it was not surprising that she was blamed. Ariana didn't want Vittoria at all, since in the past, it was she who led her to a tragic death. But even the heroine didn't expect that the head of investigations himself would take an interest in the death in the gazebo. The girl had not at all planned for the Duke of the North to provide her with so much useful support. Cyrus did this only to see the reaction of the young daughter of his enemy from the east, and Ariana's emotions were worth it, so the guy didn't regret at all that he came out of the shadows a little. For the first time in all the time of their communication, the lady finally looked her young age due to surprise. Even in such a situation, the heroine did not forget that the Duke could expect something from her in return. And in the future, Ariana was going to properly thank the guy for everything he did for her. She never forgot for a moment that behind Cyrus's smile lurked coldness and lies. Even in her past life, the heroine had heard a lot of terrible stories about the actions of young Karhi. So the lady did not let down her guard, constantly feeling herself in danger around the Duke. The guy clearly expected that the lady might be of some use to him after all her help. But Ariana didn't seem like the kind of girl who could be easily manipulated. This is what attracted Kiris so strongly, because all the other aristocrats were afraid of him. As much as the guy didn't want it, he had already become attached to the lady, who managed to surprise him at every meeting. He understood perfectly well that it was high time to return to the northern lands, where business awaited him. But the Duke wanted to see with his own eyes how far Ariana would go with her plans. He shuddered at the thought that something could have happened to the girl in the gazebo. If Cyrus hadn't made it in time, the lady wouldn't have been able to communicate calmly with him now. The fact that Ariana's own family did not give her peace did not leave the thoughts of the Duke of the North. While the heroine was tense because the guy for some reason was constantly around her, she would have preferred to leave her mother's room as soon as possible, along with the scarf containing the letters. Only Cyrus found it suspicious that Miss was trying to take the thing with her. That's how Ariana lost the letters as soon as she found them, because she didn't want to arouse suspicion. Because of Karhi's behavior, the lady was unable to take with her what could have ensured her freedom. So the girl's whole body burned with rage and powerlessness because the guy had ruined her plans. This circumstance once again reminded Ariana that she should rely only on herself. She could not have imagined that her interest in the scarf would not go unnoticed by the Duke. The guy noticed this thing by chance, but ended up finding something much more interesting. He needed these letters no less than Ariana, because they talked about the death of his parents. Meanwhile, Vittoria was doing everything she could to justify her honor. Strange things had been happening to her since the morning, and it all started with that strange letter. The lady sincerely did not understand why everyone around her accused her of killing a stranger. She could only think of Ariana, who had been causing her a lot of trouble lately. The investigator was a wise man, so he did not refuse to interrogate the eldest daughter as well. While the youngest daughter spoke with the investigator, Rachel stood nearby, so it was she who first reported that Ariana was nowhere to be seen for some reason. The maids searched the blue-haired lady's entire room, but found no trace of her. Rachel specifically blamed herself for her eldest daughter's behavior, putting on a show in front of the investigator. Vittoria repeated everything her mother did, but in reality, they were both just waiting for the opportunity to blame Ariana. But none of them suspected that the heroine had thought this moment through in advance. For some reason, everyone around decided that the eldest daughter of the Bronte family had simply run away from the estate. Rachel immediately believed this news, since it was easier for her to blame Ariana for everything. She was going to do everything possible to stop Vittoria from being accused of murder. But once again, everything didn't go according to Madame's plan, because the eldest daughter had already been found. The maids themselves did not expect that the girl would be in an unexpected place all this time. While the estate was in turmoil, the heroine came to help Rosalind with her heavy laundry. None of the investigators believed that the young lady was actually involved in servants' affairs. But the investigators saw that there could be no mistake, since only Ariana had hair that color. The joy on the girl's face confused many, as it seemed sincere and genuine. Seeing this picture, gossip began to spread among the aristocrats that Ariana was indeed being mistreated. The heroine brilliantly prepared for the meeting with relatives who would try to accuse her. She learned to play the role of a poor lady so well that no one had any suspicions. And only Rachel felt that with each passing second, she was becoming more and more drawn into her daughter's plan. The investigator had only one question about where Ariana had been all day. And it was not difficult for the girl to prove that she spent all her time with Rosalind. The huge number of washed items served as undeniable confirmation of this. So the investigator had no doubt that Vittoria was guilty of the murder. This accusation was a real blow for the girl who had hoped to be acquitted. She had never been in a situation before that could tarnish her reputation to such an extent. Only Rachel rushed to the defense of her daughter, whom she sincerely believed to be innocent. But none of the aristocrats dared to help Madame, even though they respected her. The investigator's decision was not subject to discussion, since all the evidence was against Vittoria. Only the sharp male voice that sounded so suddenly made the man slow down a little. It turned out that the head of the Bronte family himself had finally arrived in response to the noise outside the estate. All this time, he was so busy with business that he knew nothing about his daughter's accusations. Jacob had no idea that everything had happened so quickly while he was away. Vittoria's face lit up at the sight of her father, as she hoped for his support in this situation. But the head of the family could not act recklessly in front of so many witnesses. So this time, he did not take his daughter's side, which is what she so strongly expected from her father. The girl's heart was pierced by the pain of betrayal. As her own father sent her to prison, the lady refused to believe in the reality of what was happening until the very end. But it was not a dream at all. But Jacob remained merciless to the pleas of his daughter, whom he did not care about. Vittoria personally confirmed that her father had not even looked in her direction the entire time. Her mind was filled with jealous thoughts that Bronte would definitely protect his middle daughter, and Helena would never have known all the horror that Vittoria was now experiencing. This realization hit the lady who had believed in their happy family all this time the hardest. And only one heroine was satisfied with what happened, because that's exactly how she planned everything. Finally, she smiled happily at her younger sister, as she had no plans to hide her participation. Only now did Vittoria realize that all this time, she should have been wary of the cunning Ariana. After everything that happened, the heroine felt as if she had been squeezed worse than a lemon. But she was once again convinced that Rosalind could be completely trusted. From early morning, the maid successfully spread rumors that her mistress had helped her with the laundry. So, in the end, no one in the estate had any doubts about where Ariana was. Moreover, the assistant personally took on most of the laundry to help the girl. And the most pleasant thing for the heroine was that Rosalind did not ask her a single clarifying question. So this day turned out to be successful, in part due to the efforts of the faithful and obedient maid. The lady could not deny the fact that the Duke of the North also helped her greatly in this matter. No matter how much the girl pushed the guy away, he always did her a good service in fulfilling her plans. But because of Carus, the heroine ended up losing the letters that could have been her salvation. Ariana was afraid to run away from the estate to her father without confirmation that she would be useful. All her life, the girl saw only indifference from the outside and knocked on closed doors. And the heroine no longer wanted to experience the pain of being rejected once again. She was used to being an unwanted child, something her unloved family constantly reminded her of. So the girl was afraid that Russell would react in the same way to her appearance empty-handed. That is why the heroine needed Rachel's letters, which had political value, so much. Meanwhile, Vittoria was still fervently trying to defend her innocence in the murder. But no matter how much the girl screamed, the investigator did not believe a single word she said. In prison, the girl's days dragged on endlessly, and she did not believe that anyone would take her away. The lady was constantly tormented by the thought that the family did not need such a terrible daughter. Meanwhile, strange rumors about the activities of the famous Bronte family began to spread throughout the capital. People somehow found out that Rachel paid a mercenary to harm Ariana, In the end, it became clear to everyone that Vittoria, who was located near the gazebo, was blamed for everything, while the eldest daughter of the Bronte family was sent to prison as punishment. In this difficult situation, Rachel could only rely on her father, who was the Duke of the West. It just turned out that the man had no intention of helping his own daughter. So the lady was left alone with her husband, who also did not know how to get out of this situation. Instead of coming to an agreement, the spouses constantly argued with each other over trivial matters. Furniture and dishes were damaged during their argument, but Jacob and Rachel did not stop. Madame blamed everything on her eldest daughter, who had been actively acting up lately. Bronte's wife was sure that if it weren't for Ariana, peace would still reign in their home. From the very beginning, the woman did not value the life of her daughter, whose birth caused her inconvenience. But only now has Rachel gathered the determination to finally get rid of her unloved daughter. But the heroine knew from the start that her actions would make her mother hate her even more. She was lucky to have such a good servant. But Ariana no longer counted on luck alone. It was necessary to flee the estate soon, before it became too bad to live there. She understood that Rosalind, no matter how much she wanted to, would not be able to save her from death. What the lady didn't expect was that rumors of Vittoria's guilt would spread so quickly throughout the area. She had no doubt that the Duke of the North had a hand in this matter. All Ariana needed from Rosalind now was one more dagger, since the last one had been taken from her. The commander of the knights saw how strong the thirst for a quiet life was in this lady. The girl seemed quiet and calm, but incredible emotions were seething inside her. And Lewis supported the decision of the Duke's daughter, who liked her because of her inner core. The heroine silently dreamed of the day when her family would face retribution for their actions in a past life. Some of her relatives were already going through difficult times, but that wasn't enough for Ariana. Before her rebirth, she suffered so much that her rage never weakened for a second. Until now, no one in the family has come close to the despair that the heroine once experienced, so she was going to lower her relatives into the very abyss in order to escape peacefully. The lady would not regret her decision at all, even if it led to her death again. The only thing that bothered the lady in this situation was the inaction of the Duke of the West. Rodion Oblin was truly always distinguished by the fact that he did not allow any of his relatives to be disgraced. But now he had no time for Bronte, because he was suddenly visited by the young Duke of the West himself. Cyrus was glad that he had ruined all the plans of his old enemy, whom he could not take revenge on. It was the appearance of this guy that prevented Rodion from getting poor Vittoria out of captivity. Even the Duke of the West's wise lieutenants had no idea what Karhi's purpose was. Oblin remembered that in his youth, Kiris's parents were brutally murdered after numerous accusations. In that situation, only this boy survived, for whom one of his close assistants gave his life. Since then, the northern lands have been mired in constant wars for the opportunity to rule. And this continued until the young duke ascended the throne again, defeating all his opponents. Rodion knew that after everything that had happened, Kiris's heart was forever captured by cruelty and pain. What the Duke of the West feared most was that his enemy would learn the truth about the death of his parents. In fact, it was in Rachel's letters that Karha read that his family had been killed unfairly. However, he could not allow himself to reveal the whole truth now, because there was not enough evidence. The Duke of the West was always distinguished by his cunning and treachery, so he could avoid punishment this time too. But Cyrus saw that his mere presence made Rodion nervous and at a loss for words. Meanwhile, Isaac was still idle, because his master did not want to return to the north. So, as soon as the guy saw at least one familiar person, his face lit up with joy. True, even Noah did not want to relax next to Isaac, because it could cause Cyrus's anger. He made a special trip to the Bronte estate and made sure that Lewis was looking after Ariana well. All this time, all of Karhi's tasks revolved around the blue-haired daughter of the Duke of the East. So, the assistants inevitably began to have questions about why the gentleman acted this way. Personally, Noah refused to believe that Cyrus had finally shown feelings for one of the ladies. But Isaac was sure that the Duke of the North would never have gone to meet the Duke of the West otherwise. Karka had never really tried so hard before, for the sake of some young and naive aristocrat. In this, his faithful assistant saw a sign that the master's heart was gradually beginning to thaw. Isaac was already dreaming of a beautiful wedding for Cyrus, who had never paid attention to the ladies before. Perrin's carelessness quickly infected all his friends, who wished their master happiness. That's how Noah gave in to Isaac's persuasion, who simply needed company while drinking. The assistant did not even doubt the fact that the lady would fall in love with their gloomy master. Meanwhile, at the Bronte estate, Rachel is tired of waiting for her youngest daughter to be released. So she came up with a good way to get all the charges against Vittoria dropped in a short period of time. The woman came up with a truly insidious plan, as she found a maid she couldn't refuse. The assistant understood that the potion would bring her death, but she acted this way for the sake of her family. This is how the investigator came across the dead body of this girl, who confessed to killing the mercenary. The maid did everything so perfectly that no one could accuse her of lying after her death. So the man had to accept the fact that Vittoria was not guilty of anything in the first place. The investigator had no doubt that the information he had received was false, but he could no longer detain Bronte's daughter. This is how Vittoria was finally returned home after a long stay in detention. Rachel ignored the evil rumors that she was the one who killed that maid. Only Jacob was worried about the family's reputation, which was gradually sinking due to his wife's actions. But Madame placed all her bets on Helena, who was expected to please the aristocrats in high society. She had no doubt that the girl would quickly attract the attention of the right people. Of course, Rachel had planned to take Ariana on the trip, but not with good intentions. Only Helena dared to say out loud that they should not have taken their sister with them. But everything was decided even for the heroine, so she did not try to resist her mother's words. She had lived locked up in the mansion for so long that she could hardly believe that she was finally leaving. All the girl's thoughts revolved around the fact that she would soon be able to receive her long-awaited freedom. She had been waiting for this since her past life, and never before had she been so close to her goal. All this time, the lady felt as if she had always been in a beautiful and rich cage, and yet, somehow, she miraculously managed to reach incredible heights on the way to her goal. The lady did not regret at all that she had to leave so much behind. She knew that she should be partly grateful to the Duke of the North for the help he had provided. But Miss only let her assistant in on the carefully developed escape plan. Rosalind's eyes lit up with fire, because she was only too happy to help her mistress in this matter. The maid's enthusiasm told the heroine that she was clearly not a simple assistant in the estate. Until now, Louis has not revealed her identity to Ariana, because it was too early for that. For now, the heroine was satisfied with the fact that this assistant was like an extension of her hands. She understood perfectly well that her mother had not put her in such a good carriage for no reason. The lady could only hope that Rosalind would be able to protect herself in case of danger. The knight commander did not reveal to Ariana that she could very well stand up for her. It was enough for the daughter of the Duke of the East that the maid would have time to save herself in case of danger. The heroine knew well that their path had to lie through abandoned mountain ranges. Even Rosaline hadn't taken into account the fact that Rachel had deliberately chosen a dangerous route for the trip. All because Madame decided to finally get rid of her annoying daughter. And this time, the woman really wasn't going to stop in the face of any difficulties. Ariana had long been mentally prepared for the fact that her mother could once again buy an attempt on her life. So she prepared herself in advance to defend herself so that no one around her would get hurt. The heroine was ready to do everything to stay alive after her mother's plans. Soon they approached the most dangerous place on their mountain range. In her past life, Ariana often drove along this road and was always extremely careful. As the girl had expected, their carriage suddenly slowed down in the most inopportune place. Louis knew that an attempt would be made on the lady's life, but she didn't think it would be on such a large scale. This time, Rachel did her best, as she hired several gangs at once to deal with her daughter. Only Rosalind did not lose her head in this situation, since she had hidden a weapon with her. The heroine had no time to be surprised by the maid's skills, which did not correspond to her status. The mercenaries were already knocking on the carriage door, demanding that the girls obey them. But none of the young ladies even thought of giving up without a fight, because their thirst for life was great. Louis was the first to attack her opponents, which bought her a few minutes of their reflection. The boys clearly didn't expect their targets to be well-armed and well-trained in combat. However, the number of mercenaries still exceeded Louis's limit, which had not been the case for a long time. But the knight was not used to giving up, which is why the Duke of the North himself once chose her. Never before had Rosalind been so desperate to pave the way for people who needed to be protected. Quite quickly, the mercenaries realized that the maid was not a simple one, and this only angered them. Meanwhile, Rachel, in the carriage, was happily anticipating her long-awaited victory. She had no doubt that her cunning plan would look natural. Bandits often appeared in these places, and it was to one of them that the woman turned for help. She knew that Ariana would have a hard time, but she didn't think the girl would have the strength to escape. True, the heroine's physical fitness still failed her, as she hadn't trained enough at the estate. The mercenaries were only glad that one of the girls finally showed weakness. But this time, Lewis's skills were enough to save the lady from the hands of enemies. The knight commander selflessly threw herself into the thick of things just to protect Ariana. If the lady heard that her maid was fighting like that, she would never believe it. But now she saw with her own eyes how amazing Rosalind was in battle. So far, the assistant had managed to repel all attacks, and everything was fine with Ariana. But this luck could not last forever, because Lewis had no protection from arrows. That's how she ended up getting shot, because she sacrificed herself for the young lady. Even in such a difficult situation, Rosalind retained her sanity and ability to think clearly. But the heroine gave in to panic, because she did not want to leave such a good servant. Only Lewis's words, that she remembered the lady's high goals, made Ariana move. She hadn't yet had time to take even a little revenge on her family, so she couldn't allow herself to die. Before the maid's eyes, the heroine gained even greater determination, despite the loss of her friend. From now on, Ariana would stop at nothing to avenge Rosalind's death. With a heavy heart, the daughter of the Duke of the East left the battlefield where she had been useless. She thought bitterly that she could have saved the maid if only she had been stronger. The path that the heroine chose outwardly resembled a dead end with no exit, because at the end of it, there was a cliff. But the girl did not despair at the sight of such an end to the escape, since she had a good plan. She knew that the mercenaries were already on her heels, since Rosalind had not been able to hold them all back. In fact, the heroine in a past life found herself in exactly the same escape from bandits in the forest. Then she chose death, rather than fall into the clutches of cunning and treacherous enemies. No one knew that right under the cliff there was a small ledge where the lady fell. So now she hoped to save herself from the guys who were staring at her in exactly the same way. Ariana would never have forgiven herself if she had been captured by such terrible people. True, deep down, the girl doubted that she would be lucky again during the desperate jump. But suddenly, something happened that saved the heroine from having to jump off the cliff. The Duke of the North, as always, appeared extremely unexpectedly, but managed to save Ariana from the hands of enemies. The last thing the lady expected was to see this handsome guy in the middle of a dense forest. But Cyrus smiled as if he walked through such dark places every day. For the first time in her life, the heroine felt her heart beat joyfully at the sight of this man. She could never have put into words how much relief she felt at being saved. Until the very end, Karka could not believe that the lady was actually going to jump off the cliff. He was once again amazed at how bold the plans of the Duke's young daughter remained. Only now did Ariana admit to a friend that she was not at all afraid of dying in such a situation. So the Duke was finally convinced of how fearless the young lady was. This time, the heroine did not move away from the guy, as she was still grateful to him for saving her. But she completely relaxed and forgot that she had still been standing on the very edge of the cliff. Before Cyrus could react, Ariana flew down, and he jumped after her. With the help of magic, Karya easily prevented their fall, which could have ended tragically. The Duke even liked the fact that they became a little closer because of this careless accident. Karha noticed that there was no fear on Ariana's face, even though she almost fell into the abyss. Instead, all the girl's thoughts were focused on the quiet and gloomy forest around them. She was still worried about Rosalind, whom she had been forced to leave behind in the midst of a huge number of enemies. So communication with the Duke was not currently a priority for the worried heroine. Cyrus immediately guessed why the lady suddenly started running back to the forest. Just like before, the guy's poisonous words stopped the girl who wanted to stand up for herself. She saw nothing wrong with showing compassion to the people who help her. Although Ariana adopted a mask of indifference and cruelty, she did not use it all the time. And the Duke considered this approach a sign of weakness, because the lady had something to worry about. In the end, the girl simply did not listen to the guy, since she wanted to find Rosalind more than anything. Suddenly, she saw her assistant, who had reached the edge of the cliff on her own after the battle. The maid looked battered, but still managed to remain alive and almost unharmed. Ariana couldn't believe her eyes, because not a single assistant would have survived that fight. Everything became clear when Rosalind suddenly saluted her true master. Only now did the heroine realize that the appearance of this girl in her life was not at all accidental. It turned out that the Duke of the North was always strict with his assistants, who did not carry out orders well. But Ariana couldn't let Cyrus punish the man who had saved her life several times. She personally stood up for Rosalind, even though she understood that she was sent by Cyrus. What the lady didn't expect was that the Duke was going to punish the failed knight commander. Ariana always suspected that the maid was not simple, but she could not imagine that it was so. This circumstance so shocked the heroine that she refused to believe in Rosalind's personal motives. All this time, this girl was the best at helping Ariana, as if she were an extension of her. Most of all, Miss enjoyed sharing time with the maid, whom she began to trust. But it turned out that Louis was just sent by the Duke, who wanted to get information from the lady. This once again reminded the heroine that no one would just help her. Ariana, as before, could only rely on herself when it came to survival. But she didn't expect that the Duke of the North would not want to let her go into the dark and gloomy forest among the mountains. The guy was sure that none of the girl's plans would work against wild and hungry animals. So Miss had to accept the fact that she needed help from Cyrus and Louis. She immediately told about the cave that she discovered in her past life during her escape. Karha noticed that Ariana had a good sense of direction, even though she was sitting in the estate. But now he didn't have time to discuss this oddity, because he had to leave. The heroine was ready to jump down on her own, as she had done it once before. But for Kiris, the girl's safety was more important than anything else right now, so he didn't allow it. Just like that, before Ariana could utter a single word, Louis had already picked her up in his arms. But the lady remembered well that her assistant had been seriously injured not long ago. However, Louis, without any fear in her face, jumped down together with the young lady, whom she held tightly. The Duke was so skilled in magic that he did not need any rope for such a descent. As a result, after just a few seconds, the lady was delivered to the cave in perfect order. But before, it seemed to Ariana that this descent was much more dangerous and unpleasant than she thought. Only in the cave itself did the girl come to her senses, although she continued to remain silent. But Cyrus did not let the lady dwell on her thoughts for long, as he was interested in talking to her. It cost him nothing to use magic to light their dark path through the cave a little. But no matter how hard the guy tried, Ariana never trusted him with her heart. The girl was afraid that in the future, the Duke would definitely demand payment from her for her help. Even in this situation, the fear that Rachel would find her still haunted the young lady, so she didn't pay attention to the pain, even though she was walking on uneven ground without shoes all this time. The only thing that mattered to the heroine was that she had finally escaped from her terrible family. So the girl was not prepared for the fact that the Duke of the North would personally begin to show concern for her. In fact, Cyrus did this only to see Ariana's embarrassed face, and the reality turned out to be even better than his expectations, as the girl's face quickly turned crimson. Of course, the heroine did not give up without a fight for a long time, demanding to be put back on the ground. Louis watched the argument between the Duke of the North and the young lady from the sidelines in silence. She had heard from Isaac that their master had fallen in love, but until now she had refused to believe it. And now the Knight Commander was personally convinced that Cyrus knew how to show emotions quite well. The guy was always stubborn, so he made sure that Ariana fell asleep in his arms. He sincerely wished that the girl would finally rest, as she was too tense. And in the end, fatigue got the better of the heroine, whose desire to be independent gave in. When Miss came to her senses again, she did not immediately understand where exactly she was now. The events of the previous day slowly came into Ariana's head, causing her to jump in place. The area where the girl found herself seemed quite safe and quiet, but she still couldn't believe that she really fell asleep so easily in the arms of the young Duke of the North. All this time the lady tried to stay away, but her defenses slowly began to crumble. And all because of this handsome guy, who even managed to take care of food for the daughter of the Duke of the East. What surprised Ariana most was that Cyrus had somehow managed to get such delicious meat. Karka couldn't resist making a joke that could shock even the most steadfast person. He hinted that he had found this meat not long ago, but he had only fought with opponents in the form of mercenaries. So it was no surprise that Ariana's face reflected all the disgust she felt for the Duke. Only after this did the guy admit that he was just joking, because he liked seeing the lady's emotions. Until now, the heroine had not gotten used to the fact that this guy often provoked her for the sake of a joke. It turned out that Kiris's care did not end there, because he also helped the girl with her legs. Ariana herself understood that she needed the ointment, but she didn't think that the guy would help her personally. She couldn't even imagine a situation in which the Duke was carefully rubbing someone's feet. But once again, it turned out to be just a joke from the guy who asked the experienced Louis for help. The more the lady communicated with the Duke, the more she felt herself becoming restless. For some reason, Cyrus found words too easily, which constantly angered the young heroine. The most offensive thing was that in such a situation, the girl couldn't even be offended by the guy who saved her. During all this time, she never found an answer to the question of why she showed so much emotion around him. Suddenly, Karha changed the subject and announced that the Duke of the East must definitely accept his own daughter. The young man had no evidence, only the belief that Russell was a good man. But the heroine had closed her heart long ago, so she could not believe the words of the Duke of the North. The girl didn't expect that the guy would only support her more in response, instead of being offended. Although Cyrus himself did not notice it, he had long since begun to like Ariana for her character and intelligence. Therefore, the guy had no doubt that White would not be able to turn away from such a beautiful daughter. While the heroine only believed that everyone around her was constantly trying to kill her. For this reason, the girl expected exactly the same behavior from her father, whose face always frightened her. She was only around Cyrus because she needed help from this guy. But if it were up to Ariana, she would have already set off on a solo journey to the east. The only person the girl was sad to part with was Louis, to whom she had become well accustomed. But she understood that the maid would never stay with her because she belonged to the Duke of the North. So it was useless for Miss to even start arguing with Karha, since he would not give up the knight's commander. The heroine had no time to waste on trifles, as she had to plan a journey to the east. After everything that had happened to them, Karha hadn't expected Ariana to decide to run away so soon. He hoped in his heart that Louis's presence would keep the girl with them a little longer. But for some reason, the heroine was rushing to the east as if she were running away from a fire. While the Duke was confident that they had enough time to rest, Ariana always thought that Cyrus would at least have some understanding of the situation she was in. But the Duke had no idea of the full force of Rachel's hatred, from which the girl was trying to escape. The heroine lived her entire life with the thought that her mother would have preferred to kill her in the womb. The Duke's heart was pierced by the fact that this lady's smile was significantly different from the real one. Sadness instantly covered the guy completely, because this was not the expression on his face he wanted to see. Suddenly, Louis suggested to the Duke that at that moment he needed to console young Ariana. But the guy had no idea how exactly to support the confused girl. The last time he received support and comfort was in his distant childhood, so he remembered almost nothing. Until now, Cyrus felt sad that he had so few memories of his mother. That's why he was so stupefied by the need to somehow support poor Ariana. While the lady did not allow herself to give in to emotions, because she remembered her mother's cruelty, the heroine was in such a hurry to get east, because Rachel would not calm down until she found her body. The lady did not expect that her entire loud speech would not make any impression on the Duke of the North. Suddenly, the guy started talking about how only one thing was always important to all warriors. Ariana couldn't even imagine that it wasn't about food or weapons, but about good quality sleep. The girl really felt unwell due to lack of sleep, but she hid it from the Duke of the North. Deep down, she was so scared that she couldn't allow herself to relax even for a minute. However, Kyrus's concern still reached the lady's heart, no matter how hard she tried to close herself off from people. Listening to her body, the heroine realized that she was moving at the limit of her abilities, but she couldn't rely only on her comrades, because they were temporary. Due to constant tension and fatigue, the lady herself did not notice how she fell into a deep sleep. Never before had she felt so comfortable sleeping next to a guy she could call her enemy. Only many hours later did Ariana open her eyes and notice that she had been sleeping on the Duke's clothes all this time. This made the girl jump back sharply, as she was against such closeness with her acquaintance. To her surprise, neither Kyrus nor Louis were visible nearby, although Karhi's magic illuminated the cave. This kind of loneliness was only to the heroine's advantage, as she had not been without people around her for a long time. She realized that the dirt and dust of the past days remained on her, so she decided to wash her face. Just inside the cave, there was a wide river flowing, which the lady carefully approached in the darkness. It was the lack of light that prevented the girl from immediately realizing that she was not alone in this place. It was only when Ariana looked closely that she noticed a broad male figure in the middle of the river. It so happened that at that very moment, the Duke was also washing himself, and he felt Ariana's embarrassed gaze on him. For some time, Cyrus pretended to continue calmly washing himself in the cool water. But this couldn't last forever, so eventually the guy turned to the surprised girl. As soon as the heroine met the gaze of the half-naked Duke, her heart began to beat treacherously. Seeing this picture, the lady completely forgot about the rules of decency and did not turn away in time. Her cheeks flushed again with embarrassment, no matter how hard Ariana tried to control herself. Karhi didn't miss the lady's emotions. and he enjoyed the fact that he had accidentally embarrassed his stubborn acquaintance. He could hardly contain his laughter at the reaction of the daughter of the Duke of the East, who was so puzzled for the first time. As a result, the lady completely forgot that she had come to the water in order to wash herself in it. The guy's presence confused her, making it difficult for the girl to concentrate on anything. Cyrus skillfully took advantage of the situation, since in normal times, it was difficult to draw emotions out of the lady. As soon as the heroine remembered that she wanted to come to her father, her embarrassment disappeared into thin air. It turned out that even the Duke couldn't get out of the cave because of the heavy rain outside. Ariana never imagined that the bad weather would play such a cruel joke on her during her escape. So the small company was forced to remain together in the dark cave for some time. Only Karha genuinely enjoyed spending time with the young girl, while the heroine was constantly troubled by thoughts that she was staying in one place too long. It was only after several days that the knight's commander noticed that the prolonged rain had finally stopped, so their company could set off on a journey. Otherwise, even Lewis was already finding it hard to sit in the cave. The reconnaissance was not without adventure, but the unexpected circumstances were pleasant. It turned out that Noah and Isaac had been looking for the master all this time, along with an assistant and a young lady. The boys were very happy to see Lewis, as they did not expect their separation to last for so many days. But what surprised the knights most was that the Duke of the North still had not thought of returning home. But Peren had specially prepared everything to make Cyrus's journey as pleasant as possible. Over the course of these days, Lewis became convinced that their master's feelings were much deeper than she had imagined. Neither Noah nor Isaac believed that Karha personally took care of food and a place to sleep for young Ariana. In their place, Lewis wouldn't have believed such a thing either, but she saw everything perfectly well with her own eyes. So the girl wasn't lying when she talked about how empathetic and romantic Cyrus had become. She didn't need to convince her best friends of anything, because soon they would see everything with their own eyes. Until then, for a few more days, Cyrus ordered Lewis to keep quiet about the arrival of good weather, all because he wanted to spend as much time as possible with the daughter of the Duke of the East. All the time in the cave, the lady was overcome by strange thoughts, because she had never been in company before. Even when the Miss got married, no one in her husband's estate paid any attention to her. And here the heroine was constantly communicating with a guy who also owned the Northern Territories. Ariana felt uneasy about her constant inaction, so she longed to help Lewis somehow. But the assistant categorically forbade the lady to touch even one thing in the cave. It was strange for the girl to realize that people appeared in her life who cared about her so much. It took her a long time to get used to the fact that Lewis's concern was truly sincere. But no matter how much the assistant was against it, she still couldn't stop the lady from wanting to help. So the girl and I started washing the dishes together, and the heroine remembered that the Duke ate little. Lewis was glad that the lady suddenly began to pay attention to the guy who was trying to be near her. But Ariana was not prepared to hear that Cyrus was full only because she ate well. She was much more interested in the fact that the Duke of the North was so fluent in ice magic. It turned out that Lewis also knew some of the spells, although her powers were insignificant compared to the master. But the knight still liked to demonstrate his abilities that could save her life. So Louis proudly cast a small spell, calling upon her ice magic. This incredible beauty aroused envy within the heroine, who did not know how to defend herself. She would also like to improve her skills, but had no idea what to do to achieve this. Help for Ariana unexpectedly came from Lewis, who came up with a plan. The girl was only too happy to create an additional opportunity for the Duke to communicate with the lady. Besides, she wasn't lying when she said that the guy was a wonderful teacher in any field. The knight understood that Cyrus had never personally trained anyone, but Ariana would be a different matter for him. And indeed, Karha could not refuse the daughter of the Duke of the East in her desire to become stronger. Personally, the guy still believed that Russell White's knights would calmly protect the girl in any situation. But the heroine still didn't believe that her father would even pay strict attention to her. That's why Ariana wanted to learn how to fight for her life at least a little bit. No matter how much Cyrus held a different opinion, he approved of the young lady's aspirations. It was only for this reason that he agreed to show the girl some useful techniques in battle. The lady had no idea that it would be so easy to persuade the usually grumpy Duke to help her. And in the end, Karha even deigned to begin training with the very dagger that Miss had. Meanwhile, the Bronte couple were once again quarreling loudly over the failure to find the body of young Ariana. Even their daughters understood that this meant that the blue-haired lady might still be alive. This is the reason why Jacob was so angry with his wife for not sorting out the problems. Rachel couldn't have imagined in her worst nightmare that fragile Ariana could cope with the mercenaries. And in the end, her happy and strong family was once again falling apart before her eyes, and Madame could do nothing. Until now, she saw the death of her unloved daughter from another man as her only salvation. But the woman had no idea that at this time, Ariana was under the protection of good people. The heroine was only glad to meet the well-known assistant of the Duke of the North. At first glance, Isaac seemed to her even better than the rumors said. It turned out that he had managed to prepare good horses for the gentleman's safe journey. But Ariana had hoped that this would be where her path with her new friends would diverge. However, the Duke acted as if he had not even considered the option of traveling separately. The guy did everything to ensure that their goal was in one direction, and there was no need to split up. But the heroine was only thinking about how many times she would have to repay the Duke for his help. Only this girl was Cyrus helping time and again without compensation, something he himself did not notice. But all the assistants of the Duke of the North saw how much their master had changed in a short time. Karha sincerely wished that the lady would turn to him for help at any convenient moment, but he didn't expect that the girl would again ignore any of his attempts to help. Even in her past life, Ariana learned to ride a horse perfectly, which she demonstrated. The heroine was confident that she would not delay anyone on this trip, since she was not afraid of speed. So the whole small company headed east through a dense and dark forest with bandits. They rode so fast that the wind constantly whistled in the ears of the lady, who was not used to it. But she still tried to keep up with the Duke of the North, who confidently led them through all the wilds. The guy's face at that moment reminded the girl that he deservedly received his title. And only the master's assistants knew that in fact, he was restraining his speed. This once again proved to each of them that Cyrus had truly fallen in love with the young daughter of the Duke of the East. They couldn't ride horses forever, because the animals needed a break from time to time. During one of these stops, Isaac tried to get closer to Ariana, although she kept her distance. However, the lady rejected any help from the famous magician and alchemist until the very end. But Perrin was so desperately trying to prove to the girl that he didn't need to return the favor. Unlike the Duke, his assistant's intentions were always gratuitous. In the end, only Cyrus was able to get Ariana to take a medicine that would help with her muscle pain. During the journey, the lady became so tired that she could no longer properly respond with indignation, so she had to accept the kindness and care from these people, although she didn't like to feel obligated. What surprised Ariana most was that the Duke of the North was gradually revealing a different side. He constantly joked and flirted with her, but with his assistants, he remained a stern and strict leader. But somehow Isaac, who always got the worst of it, remained just as cheerful. He was glad that the gentleman was finally returning to the north after so long an absence. What Perrin didn't expect was that Cyrus had no plans to take Ariana with him. In his head, the assistant had long since married this girl to the stubborn master of the northern lands. So it came as a surprise to him that Karha still denied his love for the lady. Only Isaac could find the words that would prove to the master his feelings and emotions. Therefore, within a minute, the Duke was furious at the mere thought of losing Ariana. Perrin had no doubt that Cyrus would react this way, so he deliberately sacrificed himself. Only after this did the Duke agree that Ariana had long since become special to him. What surprised him most was that the lady had many surprising skills for a recluse. No matter how much information the guy searched for about this girl, he couldn't find anything. Isaac saw that his master was still thinking of ways to use Ariana for his own benefit. All this was because, since childhood, the Duke had been accustomed to stepping over other people's heads. His condition was further aggravated by the fact that the boy never learned anything about the death of his parents. So Cyrus's position on the throne was no stronger than the flame of a thin candle. And only Isaac was worried that, in the future, the master might regret his cruel decisions. While Karha denied the existence of pity and sympathy, which no one showed him, their journey was slowly coming to an end, and now the whole company was able to settle down peacefully in the village. Although the lady knew that no one would find her in this place, she still could not fall asleep because of worry. She hadn't slept alone for a long time, so she was used to the constant noise around her. And now Ariana had been given a separate room, and the silence around her weighed heavily on her. Never before had the girl traveled alongside people who were so kind to her. That's why the heroine didn't want to part with these acquaintances, although she was afraid to trust them. Without realizing it, she suddenly fell into a sleep that she was only too aware of. There was only darkness around the lady until she finally heard a familiar voice. Somehow the Duke appeared in the girl's dream, and the expression on his face puzzled the heroine. But what surprised her most was that this time the guy was persistent in expressing his desires. Ariana wasn't sure she was ready to accept such feelings from a man who had previously been her adversary. But Cyrus sincerely promised that he would always protect the girl if she went with him. But for this to happen, the guy just needed the lady to die in his place. Karhi's insidious laughter and his resemblance to Gerald haunted Miss Long after she woke up. So the next morning, she again announced her desire to separate from the company. During the time they spent together, the heroine managed to forget that she couldn't trust anyone. Even Isaac, Noah, and Lewis, whom she had come to love, no longer made the lady want to communicate. It was only this morning that the Duke of the North presented the girl with another surprise. She couldn't even imagine that suddenly, the guy would also need to go east. Karha spoke confidently about the fact that he had his own business in the domains of Duke Russell White. The heroine had no reason not to believe the Duke's words, that he had never lied to her about anything. Besides, she knew that Cyrus had been fighting against a dangerous group of people for many years. Karka was delighted that the lady of the moment had guessed the main reason for his arrival in the East. He really tried to deal with the Paganist Guild, the remnants of which were scattered across the territories. These people represented a huge danger and lived mainly in the eastern lands of the empire. There were rumors that these heretics did not spare people and offered them as sacrifices to their gods. Several years ago, the ruler of the empire ordered the dukes to deal with these people, but only Cyrus successfully drove out all the followers of Paganus from his territory. He was surprised that the lady was not afraid to go to the east, where there were many of these terrible people. The whole point was that the heroine didn't care whether she died at the hands of her mother or at the hands of heretics. Such courage once again proved to Karhe that the blood of the Duke of the East truly flowed in Ariana. Only one heroine still doubted her abilities, because she was not physically strong. But Cyrus believed that the lady would be able to choose her own path as a warrior, which would lead her to victory. Only after her friend's words did the girl's eyes open, and she realized one simple truth. Even in her past life, the lady never tried to defeat her enemies with brute force alone. Instead, she chose a slightly different path, even though she had failed to save herself in the past. But this time, Ariana tried to remain kind and noble, even though her heart was wounded. The heroine despised the treachery and cruelty of her relatives, against whom she fought. Finally, the long-awaited peace came within the girl, because she accepted her weaknesses. And all this happened from just one word from the Duke, whom the lady had missed all her life. So Miss honestly said that the guy was very wise, which surprised Cyrus. Ariana had no idea that such compliments were never said in high society. But these words were so similar to the lady's true personality that Karha accepted them with pleasure. He couldn't remember the last time he laughed so joyfully because of just one phrase. Thus, the whole company continued their journey to the east, which was greatly extended due to their secrecy. For the first time in 2 lives, the heroine came to her father not in order to overthrow him from the throne, but in her past life, the girl did a lot of terrible things, obeying a bad person. Her husband mercilessly ordered that the entire White family be dealt with, and the lady silently obeyed. So she expected that this time too, Russell would greet her sternly, even though he would not know about the past. If only Ariana had had Rachel's letters with her, she would have been much less worried. But Cyrus took away her opportunity to steal them, but the lady was not offended by such a handsome guy. Surprisingly, the Duke of the North increasingly supported the girl as soon as he saw the thoughtfulness on her face. And only recently has the heroine begun to accept this care, as her heart has thawed. But as soon as the lady turned to face her friends, they all suddenly disappeared without a trace. Ariana always knew this moment would come, but she still wasn't ready for it. And now, there wasn't a single living soul left for many kilometers around the girl, no matter how hard she looked. The heroine's attachment to her friends led to her feeling pain in her heart after their disappearance. But the lady knew from the very beginning that she had to walk her path alone until the very end. But for some reason, it turned out to be much more difficult than Ariana had previously imagined. However, she had no right to give up for the sake of her past self, who had been so cruelly set up by her relatives. Meanwhile, the Duke of the North's assistants were worried that he had not left them with Ariana. But the guy was convinced that Russell White would never harm his daughter, whom he had never seen. In fact, he had not yet planned to return north, as he had other things to do. The letters that the boy received from the daughter of the Duke of the East opened his eyes to the truth about the death of his parents. And now Cyrus was burning with a desire for revenge, for which he needed powerful allies. Meanwhile, Ariana was anxiously thinking about how she would be received in a house where she had never been. Rachel always described the Eastern estate with horror, although she was always kindly cared for there. No matter how much the girl looked around, she couldn't find any angry people anywhere. On the contrary, the common people seemed to her even happier than those who lived in the Western territories. Only one person accidentally bumped into the heroine and didn't even ask her for forgiveness for it. The lady had never walked alone through the city streets before, so she was not used to such treatment from people. She couldn't even imagine that if you don't reveal your high status, you can be offended by everyone. Suddenly, Ariana realized that all her pockets of money were now completely empty. This could only mean that the guy didn't just crash into her, but robbed her on purpose. The stranger ran away so fast that the girl could barely keep up with him, but she needed her money. So the lady tried her best to keep up, although she was clearly slower than the thief. The only thing that saved her was that at some point the guy suddenly stopped on the spot. Ariana firmly believed that a squad of knights would soon come to her aid in this situation, but the homeless man knew very well that there was never any help in these slums. However, all his courage vanished as soon as the young man heard the clatter of hooves right behind him. He couldn't believe his eyes when he actually saw a squad of knights who came to the aid of the girl. Previously, the bandit was always lucky, and no knight noticed how carefully he stole money from people. But this time, something went wrong from the very beginning, because the lady loudly chased him through all the streets. But most of all, the boy was afraid of the knight's sharp blade, which was pointed straight at him. The man had no intention of forgiving the person who had so brazenly stolen money in the middle of the day. So the thief had to apologize nicely before they let him go. The knights always had a soft spot for beautiful girls, and therefore they constantly tried to help them. But the heroine didn't expect that someone from the family of the Eastern Duke would come to her aid. The lady remembered well that different shades of blue had always been a hallmark of the White family. And so it happened that the girl met one of her father's closest relatives. It was this guy who nobly returned the lady's money, although he did not yet know her identity. His name was Abister White, and this young man was always distinguished by his kindness and attentiveness to people. Although the relative seemed good-natured, the lady was accustomed to not trusting everyone. His cheerful behavior only made Ariana more embarrassed, and she wanted to continue acting alone. But Ibister believed that everyone should be able to accept help from others. Under such pressure, the girl quickly gave in, as she did not want to attract unnecessary attention. But she didn't expect White to take decisive action so quickly. Before the heroine could even blink, she found herself on the horse of the guy who wanted to help her. Abister volunteered to personally take the lady to the place she had been heading to all this time. Ariana had to spend a lot of effort to hide all her emotions from this strange guy. What surprised her most was that her relative radiated kindness and care towards her. But she remembered well the words of her mother, who hated all the cruel and evil whites. But Ariana herself didn't notice even a hint that Abister was a bad person. As promised, the guy quickly brought her to the White estate, which was striking in its grandeur. The girl could hardly believe that after all the trials, she had finally achieved her goal. A little more than 2 months had passed since her rebirth when the heroine began to act. During this time, she met people who were ready to give their lives for her without question. And in the end, the lady escaped that terrible future in which she dies in a cold dungeon. But she couldn't call this place home, even though she was born here in her childhood. The White family still made the girl wary, even though they only gave smiles to those around them. But the lady could no longer hide her identity, because she had not come to this place for nothing. As soon as she revealed her face, her hair told Abister that he had a relative. The guy clearly didn't expect that he would ever be able to meet Ariana herself, but the appearance and words of the miss left no doubt in the knight's mind that she was from his family. This is how the heroine was moved in panic to the living room, where she was supposed to wait for her father. Despite her outward calm, Ariana was shaking violently with fear and worry inside. She remembered all too well the fury on the Duke of the East's face when they met in their previous life. The most offensive thing was that now the lady had no evidence of pure intentions, so she had to use pity to prove to her family that she was harmless. The Whites' decision directly affected the life of the heroine, who did not want to return to the West. But their faces did not express anything good, which only frightened the young aristocrat even more. She was so afraid and worried that she had difficulty finding the right words at such an important moment for her. Miss did not dare to look into the eyes of her father, whose face had frightened her in her past life. All she needed now was a small room somewhere in the estate. All because, more than anything in the world, the lady feared that she would be cruelly sent back home. According to his mother, Russell White was exactly the kind of person who would do such a thing. That's why the heroine was trembling all over, praying so desperately for a good outcome for herself. She couldn't even imagine that her grandmother would suddenly jump up from her seat to hug her. The woman's touch seemed soft and pleasant to the lady, as if she was welcome. But most of all, the heroine was surprised by her father's face when she finally dared to look at him. At first, Ariana thought Russell was furious at her unexpected appearance, but the man's emotions betrayed his horror at the state in which his daughter arrived to him. A few minutes ago, Caroline and Theodore, who were Russell's parents, heard about their granddaughter. Their assistant himself was surprised by the appearance of the blue-haired girl in front of the estate. Grandma and Grandpa were in no hurry to take my word for it, since hair could only be dyed temporarily. But inside Caroline, the certainty was already growing that it was indeed young Ariana who had come to them. She had been looking forward to meeting her granddaughter for so long that she already considered this event impossible. So, in the end, the woman was not mentally prepared for the meeting to finally take place. The assistant had no doubt that the Duke's daughter had come to them because she looked like her father. All this news so shocked the Grand Duke of the East that he was completely at a loss within himself. The man panicked, as if he were a small child who didn't know what to do. Russell's greatest fear was that he would frighten his daughter at their first meeting. Theodore had long since become accustomed to the fact that his son could not control the emotions on his face. They had been facing this problem since White's childhood and had never been able to solve it. As a result, in his youth, the boy frightened all the children simply because he could not smile properly. To this day, the man's anxiety was instantly reflected on his face in the form of anger. Only his parents knew that Russell was actually a kind and sweet person. However, this nuance made the Duke look at people with a ferocious expression, which is why he frightened them. This is how the man persuaded his parents to go with him to the long-awaited meeting with Ariana. Russell's heart was beating wildly in his chest with anticipation of this meeting. He couldn't believe that he would finally meet his daughter, whom he truly loved. The last time a man held her was in his distant childhood, but he remembered those feelings forever. At that moment, there was no one more important to Russell than his small and beautiful daughter. When he first saw Ariana, it was as if he had found a whole bright and warm world for himself. But the Duke's happiness was short-lived, as his wife soon ran away with her daughter. He sent a whole bunch of letters to the Bronte estate, but never received a reply to any of them. For many years, the Duke suffered constantly from longing for his beloved little daughter. And one day he couldn't stand it anymore, and personally came to the estate in the Western Territories. But then Rachel cruelly lied that Ariana did not want to see her biological father at all. The woman skillfully pretended that the girl was living happily in her new family and did not want to go back. This is how all of Russell's hopes and dreams were destroyed, because he didn't want to force anyone. That night was the last time the Duke personally tried to meet his daughter, who had been taken by Rachel. And now, after so much time, the man could finally see the girl who came to him. Russell's every thought was focused on his desire to be a good father to young Ariana. But her appearance at first sight struck the man, who expected something completely different. It was for this reason that White froze in place, because he could not believe his eyes. While the heroine believed that her father actually harbored a burning hatred towards her, but Russell was simply speechless from shock, because the girl was in a terrible state. Every careful word she said wounded him to the very heart, because he wanted to love her. Ariana acted as if she was asking to stay overnight with strangers, begging for a favor. All this horrified Russell, because this was not how he wanted to see his daughter grow up. She looked like she had never eaten properly, and bruises covered her entire body. The Duke did not need to look closely to understand how pitiful the girl's body was. All this time, Russell believed that his daughter was being treated well by the new Bronte family, and she looked as if she had never in her life been cared for by the gentle hands of maids. So the first thing the Duke did was ask his assistants to get Ariana in perfect order. For the first time in her life, the heroine found herself in such a rich bath of food that she was right next to her. Only now did she realize how much richer her father was than the envious and cruel Duke of the West. So Rodion caused a quarrel between the Emperor and Russell, which caused the ruler to turn away from the East. And for many years in a row, the Duke of White fought the representatives of Paganus on his own, while the heroine endured beatings and humiliation from her own mother, her entire life. It even got to the point that the maids began to laugh at her, as if she were a nobody. As a result, Ariana's life ended in shame, although she was not actually guilty of anything. But the lady's family on her father's side had no idea what she had to go through in the past. But it was perfectly clear to them that the girl had been subjected to violence for a long time. This circumstance deeply hurt Russell, to whom Rachel lied about her daughter's happy life. But Caroline could clearly see that Ariana's body was covered in terrible bruises. Never in his life had the Duke regretted so much that he had once given in and abandoned his daughter. Pain tore at his heart, because he could have saved the girl from the oppression of that family much earlier. In the end, the man could only blame himself for inaction, because time had been lost. He was horrified that the lady was going to prove her worth to her family. Russell knew exactly what happy teenagers Ariana's age should look like, but looking at the girl's face, White did not believe that she was capable of smiling so joyfully. What angered him most was that Rachel turned out to be a terrible mother, and he trusted her. Only Theodore was prepared for the fact that not all parents were good to their children. Even Russell couldn't cope with his parental responsibilities, leaving his daughter alone. That is why the heroine communicated so carefully with her relatives, afraid of seeing their anger. Although she was seated next to her father, the girl did not feel any support or care from him, but she saw the anxious glances that her grandmother cast at her, constantly watching the lady. All the time at the table, Ariana tried to behave as befits a true aristocrat. She was tormented by the expectation of something bad happening to her relatives, who had so easily accepted her into the estate. The lady was sure that the family could move on to punishing her at any moment. Although, in reality, Caroline was only thinking about what her granddaughter had to go through in general. She noticed that the girl's manners were much better than those of many ladies during their debut. Because of her sad past, the heroine was indeed well prepared for everything. The heroine waited with bated breath for the family to move on to the main conversation. But her grandparents wanted Ariana to get some good rest after the journey. This proposal was very different from what the lady expected from the family she had just arrived to visit. She was still afraid that she would be forced to prove her worth and usefulness to everyone. Suddenly, Caroline stood up and extended her hand to her granddaughter, whom she had not seen for so long. But Ariana took this gesture as Rachel asking her for those very letters. Everyone around was horrified as soon as the girl started talking about how she would be of use a little later. The lady couldn't even imagine that the people around her would actually be so sincerely kind to her. Caroline just wanted to hold her granddaughter's hand, and she had no other intentions. But Ariana's wounded heart refused to believe that someone could just love her like that. Her hand trembled madly with fear as she extended it to this pleasant-looking woman. The girl had a hard time accepting the fact that no one demanded any evidence or information from her. The grandmother, with a joyful smile on her face, brought her granddaughter into a spacious and beautiful room. But what surprised the lady most was that this room had been waiting for her since childhood, according to Caroline. Before, Ariana always felt like the White family hated her more than anything else, and in the end, everyone around showed the girl miracles of attention and pleasant care. But the fears inside the heroine were so great that she was not ready to believe in love. As soon as the grandmother left, heavy thoughts again overwhelmed the Duke's young daughter. She couldn't relax at all, as the surrounding luxury seemed unfamiliar. The lady had noticed more than once that parents took their children by the hand, but they treated her differently. All her life, Rachel spitefully drove away her daughter, who never received anything good. But there was so much love and kindness on Caroline's face that the girl felt uncomfortable. As a result, the heroine became completely confused about how she should behave with her relatives. The next morning, loud arguments took place between the Whites as the family was dissatisfied. The loudest shouter was Palos, who always had a hot and fiery character. His older brother, Langsley, took the situation with Ariana more calmly, although he was also worried. What troubled him far more was the suspicion that the lady might have ulterior motives. Only he raised the question that the Duke's daughter might actually be a spy. But Palos was most indignant against this assumption, which he did not want to believe. So it became increasingly difficult for Langsley to defend his position as a worrier. All conversations were suddenly interrupted by Russell, who was hurt by suspecting his young daughter of something. Langsley remembered better than anyone exactly what Rachel had done when she suddenly left their estate. That's why the brother still didn't trust Ariana, who could easily follow in the footsteps of her treacherous mother. But Russell didn't even want to listen to the younger one, because for him, family was always more important than prejudice. Palos immediately supported the elder, since he himself held the same opinion. It is unknown how long the brothers would have argued if a maid had not suddenly burst into their room. The girl, in a panic, brought the sad news that Ariana, for some reason, had not come to her senses. Meanwhile, the heroine had an extremely sad dream about her childhood, where no one needed her. For some reason, the lady's thoughts periodically returned to her mother, although she never paid attention to her. Only once did she dare to turn directly to Rachel, because she needed care. At that time, the heroine still hoped that she would be able to melt the cruel heart of her own mother. But Rachel's reaction at that moment was even more terrifying than Ariana could have ever imagined. She forever remembered that she was not allowed to go near her mother, no matter how much she wanted to. And the consequences of this terrible dream were now directly reflected on the face of the young heroine. Ariana tossed and turned in a daze, unable to escape the clutches of sleep. The relatives watched the girl with concern, realizing that they could not help her in any way. Russell, who indirectly brought the lady to this state, suffered the most from helplessness, but his mother blamed only Rachel for lying to the White family about Ariana's life. No one could argue that the girl's entire body looked terrible due to beatings and exhaustion. Palos was the first to attack his brother, who refused to believe the girl until the very end. But now it became obvious that the lady had not lied for a moment about her life at the Bronte estate. Russell took her condition personally, since in the past, he could have gained custody of his daughter. Langsley knew the law better than anyone, so he knew Rachel had custody rights. Everyone understood that Ariana would only get worse if her mother demanded that she be taken back. So the adults decided to hide the lady's presence on their territories. Russell's first order of business was to find evidence of Ariana's abuse, and for this, his brother needed all the information from the lady, although it was difficult to ask her for details. After some time, the heroine's sleep finally calmed down, as if she had found herself in a real paradise. Ariana watched with pleasure the endless blue sky that appeared before her eyes. So when she opened her eyes, her mind and consciousness were finally in perfect order. But she still didn't expect to see her father in front of her, who never left his daughter's bedside. For the first few seconds, the heroine felt as if she was only seeing the remnants of a dream in front of her. But soon the lady realized that Russell was indeed personally near her bed. Ariana remembered very well the honor with which one should address people of higher status. But her words only made Pelos even more angry, as he wanted to get closer to the girl. The man was the first to express outrage that the lady did not call Russell her father. But the heroine couldn't understand how she could even address the Duke of the East in such a way. Moreover, Palos wanted Ariana to call him only uncle, which is what he was to her. Such demands only further confused the girl, who had never known a real family. She still felt that she should treat everyone with as much respect and politeness as possible. However, the Duke of the East's middle brother looked like he dreamed of being called uncle. Ariana was used to always obeying her elders, so this time she didn't argue with the elder. But she didn't expect that one word of hers could bring so much joy to her active relative. In contrast, the other uncle was the embodiment of strictness and calmness all his life. He was the one who had a lot of questions for Ariana, since he was responsible for the legal part of the family. The heroine was only too happy to help the adult to prove that she could be trusted. Her heart fluttered with fear when the man's hand suddenly reached towards her face. But it turned out that Langsley only wanted to support the girl by stroking her head. Like everyone else, he would also like Ariana to have a good rest first. The heroine found it strange that all these people showed concern for her by default. She was prepared for any mistrust, but it turned out that the family accepted her with open arms. Each of the men was constantly fighting for the attention of the girl they missed. It was clear to everyone around, even without words, how much Ariana's arrival delighted the White family. Only Palos showed his emotions openly, rejoicing at the prospect of having a niece. The heroine couldn't bear such joy, and long-awaited tears of relief welled up in her eyes. When all the adults had left, the Duke of the East, for some reason, still remained next to his daughter. But the heroine felt uncomfortable eating quietly in front of her father, since she was not used to him. Russell immediately noticed the fact that the lady had not yet fully recovered from her sleep. The man sincerely wanted to help his daughter with nutrition, but his face let him down once again. So Ariana experienced real horror at the sight of her father's emotions, because she didn't yet know his peculiarities. But in such a situation, she could not resist a man who was higher in status than her. Suddenly, Russell begged the lady to let him spoon-feed her. Ariana was surprised by the fact that her father's voice was so full of sadness and pain next to her. There was a feeling that the Duke was worried about the girl, but she refused to believe it. She was still waiting for the man to ask questions about the estate, but for some reason, they never came. It turned out that Russell didn't care about the reasons why his daughter came to his estate. He was ready to accept her into his life at any time, even if he would suffer because of it later. This is because White always considered Ariana his daughter, even though he didn't take her away as a child. Even with all his attentiveness, the Duke did not notice that they were now being watched. Two mercenaries from Rachel finally found the blue-haired lady to kill her. Even they felt the woman had crossed a line when she asked them to find her daughter. But they never argued with the orders of the customers, because they always asked for a higher fee. So they calmly endured all of Rachel's anger, understanding that Madame simply wanted the task to be completed. They thought that the Duke of the East would not be an obstacle to the execution of their terrible deeds. But the mercenaries underestimated the main defenders of the Eastern territories, who did not let anyone through. The Russell brothers arrived just in time to prevent an assassination attempt on Ariana. Even Langsley joined Palos, though he hated getting his hands dirty with blood. But none of them took into account that the mercenaries had capsules of poison in their mouths. So, in just a moment, there was no trace left of the killers, so it would be impossible to interrogate them. Over the course of the next week, the heroine gradually got used to the kindness of the people around her. She quickly found a common language with Catherine Luell, who became her personal assistant at the estate. The maid was sure that everyone around was only happy about Ariana's sudden arrival. The lady was just not sure that the heir to the Duke of the East would take over the general disposition. After Rachel's escape, Russell took in little Zior Ovelian, to whom he wanted to give the throne. In her past life, the girl only once saw this brave warrior who won many battles. Then, he was not afraid to give his life for his father, who had placed great hopes in him. Until now, the heroine was tormented by a feeling of guilt for the fact that before her rebirth, she personally destroyed this family. The lady had a strong desire to be recognized, but even after this, her husband did not love her. But now, Ariana relied entirely on people who had no idea about her betrayal. Their kindness and care made the girl feel bitter, although she no longer made terrible plans. Thoughts about Ziora did not cause any envy in the girl, because she had no intention of taking the throne. In the past, her grandparents once visited her, but the lady did not believe their regrets. Somewhere deep down, the heroine wishes that the White family truly loved her. But Ariana had no doubt that her father could have taken her earlier if he had wanted to. She had experienced so much humiliation and pain that she had become accustomed to not trusting the people around her. Loneliness became Ariana's faithful companion, no matter how hard she tried to escape from it. But now, it was much easier for the girl not to get attached to anyone, so as not to experience pain. Rumors that the Duke of the East's own daughter had returned home soon reached the military camp, and Zior could not miss this news, although it caused pain in his knightly heart. Now, the guy could well be worried that the girl would take his place on the throne. Only an heir could have had such sad thoughts, because his place was important to him. So it was no surprise that Zior couldn't be truly happy about the lady's return. As usual, the emotional Ovelian was plunged into sadness due to the news, which was controversial. The assistant had long since become accustomed to the fact that the master often worried about little things and trifles. So in moments like these, he just tried not to bother the guy who needed to figure himself out. Therefore, Zior once again allowed himself to show emotion due to the fact that he could be removed. Meanwhile, the heroine continued to live peacefully in the estate, which she had reached with difficulty. The only thing she was worried about was that everyone around her wanted to introduce her to young Isabel White. This girl was a relative of Ariana, although they had only met once in their past life. At that time, the lady was so carried away by other guys that she didn't even look in her sister's direction. But now the situation was conducive for the girls to finally get to know each other. But the heroine wasn't eager to communicate with a lady who was about her age. She looked forward with horror to the meanness and deception that girl could perpetrate. Only Isabel was genuinely looking forward to meeting her sister, whom she had never seen. Her parents warned her in advance that it would be better not to bother the daughter of the Duke of the East. And soon, Ariana showed up at the general dinner, trying to act like a real aristocrat. But she was the only one who observed all the rules and decorum, since the White family valued sincerity more. It was for this reason that Isabel immediately declared that her sister's outfits were almost tasteless. Palos was horrified by how much his daughter had become disobedient to the rules of behavior. After all, it was Russell who chose all of Ariana's clothes, trying to follow the latest fashion. This time, the heroine was prepared for mistrust, so she calmly responded to all the girls' words. But Isabel was dissatisfied, even with the fact that her relative addressed her too formally. In this, she was like her father, for even Palos could not tame her hot temper. The heroine tried her best to ignore the girl who was deliberately provoking her, but Isabel was not one to put up with such treatment at the table. Because of such conversations, The atmosphere at the table quickly became more tense than anyone would have liked. Ariana was soon complimented on how well she had her table manners. These words made the girl remember how much work she had to go through for this. She suffered many times in prison because of the cruelty of the teacher who instilled manners in her. And the result was that Isabel envied her sister, whose manners were much better than hers. The girl never hid her emotions, so she quickly began to show dissatisfaction. She immediately stated that a lady does not have to eat some of the products if she does not like them. None of the adults understood why Paolo's eldest daughter was behaving so strangely. And only the heroine realized that all this time she had really been forcing herself to eat unpleasant food. The relatives promised that they would definitely explain to the girl how she should behave in society. Ariana didn't even think of being offended by her sister, although her direct words could have hurt anyone. Isabel screamed until the very end that a lady should not do something she did not like at all. So one of the counts, with great difficulty, dragged her along with him to have a good talk about her behavior. But Isabel still broke free to remind Ariana that she could live freely. Only after this did the girl's strength leave her, and she was finally forced to calm down for a while. Of course, the adults apologized to the heroine for her sister's bad behavior. But the lady was impressed, because she really had been forcing herself to eat things she didn't like all this time. She had never allowed herself to choose before, because she was afraid of appearing weak. But now circumstances were such that Ariana had a lot of freedom. After lunch, the girl had to join the discussion with the rest of her relatives. She remained wary, but the adults only asked about her wishes for the future. The heroine honestly admitted that she would like to stay in the estate until she comes of age. She had no idea that everyone around her had long considered her part of their large and strong family. So it was strange for the men to hear that the lady had no hope of staying in the estate. While the girl was prepared for the fact that even these relatives would demand a lot from her, she sincerely promised that she would never betray her family as long as they supported her in the estate. At this time, Russell was thinking about the many letters he had read about the abuse of his daughter, so it didn't surprise him that Ariana acted so cautiously around her good relatives. The girl seemed to be asking the Duke why he had treated her this way and abandoned her to her fate. Russell constantly blamed himself for not saving the little girl he loved so much. What he feared most in the world was that Ariana hated him for all his past actions. In fact, the lady did not feel anything good towards her father after everything she had been through. If it weren't for Russell's actions, all the pain in Ariana's past life could have been avoided. However, the girl would never have admitted to her father how much hatred she felt. But the Duke of the East easily recognized the false smile of his daughter, who still did not trust him. The man accepted this fact with dignity, although his whole heart was breaking with pain. So he still planned to officially appoint Ariana as his daughter in the future. The Duke's assistants were already busy collecting materials to put this plan into action, and the girl was ready to help in order to take away guardianship from her evil mother forever. She knew several people from high society who witnessed her hard life. The adults did not expect that they would be able to collect even the words of aristocrats as evidence. But Russell had no reason not to trust Ariana, because he had loved her since childhood. This is how the heroine began to help in the investigation, which was supposed to lead to her freedom. That evening, in the Northern Territories, Count Teseo Heron awaited the return of his master. His son Andrew helped his father in everything, since he was supposed to take his place in the future. Soon the knights announced the long-awaited arrival of the Duke of the North, who had been delayed on the way. As usual, Cyrus kept a calm expression on his face, and nothing could surprise him. During Karhi's absence, Teseo looked after the estate well, so no problems arose. But he didn't expect that the Duke would return without the girl he had feelings for. It was Isaac who spread all these rumors about Kiris, and they reached the Northern Territories. Of course, Karha was not one to forgive such actions, even from close aides. Perrin was always ready to die because of his big mouth, and now that day has come. So the guy didn't even think of being indignant about the cruel punishment from the Duke of the North. He was saved only by the faithful Noah, who wished to share all the pain with his wayward friend. Cyrus encouraged friendly relations between warriors, so this time he softened the punishment for them. So now Lewis only had to whip his assistants, rather than kill them. To prevent the master from coming up with something else, Teseo quickly distracted him from the hapless knights. From the count's face, Karka noticed that there was still one thing worthy of his attention. It turned out that Heron had managed to catch the children whose minds had been zombified by the Paganist Guild. So, despite their appearance, these little ones became the most deadly killers. That is why the Duke did not hesitate, even though he had to point his sword at the children. Cyrus had long since become accustomed to the fact that if he did not kill Paganus's followers, they would kill him. Even Teseo didn't expect the captured children to retain their strength for their final attack. That is why the Duke showed no mercy to anyone who touched this damned and cruel guild. Immediately after a long journey, he needed a good rest in a warm bath. But even in such a situation, heavy thoughts did not leave Carus, who thought only about revenge. As a child, the Emperor certainly had a hand in killing the young boy's parents. He placed Karhu on the throne of the North, in the hopes of quickly destroying him. As a result, the boy's beloved nanny had to sacrifice herself to save his life. And Count Heron gave his hand so that the young heir to the North would not be harmed during the battle. This is how Cyrus's personality became stronger, and he no longer wanted to be that defenseless boy. Until now, he had been planning to raise an army to take revenge on everyone for the death of his parents. Along the way, he also looked for proof that his family was not actually guilty. And Rachel's letters told part of this story, although the information was still scant. However, the Duke did not regret at all that he had spent so much time observing Ariana. In the end, he was able to get at least something to punish all his offenders in the future. Of course, thoughts about the girl who had so interested him also did not leave Cyrus's head. He hoped that she would be treated well in the East, since Russell had written a lot about his daughter. Ariana's fate was so important to Karhe because she reminded him so much of himself as a child. But unlike him, the blue-haired lady never learned to trust those close to her. Meanwhile, at Cyrus's estate, Isaac was taking his punishment for his chatter with dignity. Lewis was merciless even to her friends, because honor for her was much higher than knightly friendship. So Isaac got what he deserved for spreading rumors about the Duke of the North's marriage. His friend Noah still didn't believe that Cyrus would open his heart to some unsociable girl from the East. The boy didn't believe that their master was ever capable of smiling happily. This is because even in their safe lands, Karka was always on edge. But the knights did not know that the Duke of the North was now seeing a beautiful dream about young Ariana. And so on his face, there was a sweet smile that no one had ever seen before. The few weeks that the heroine lived on her father's estate passed surprisingly calmly for her, but the girl still never forgot for a minute that her mother could still try to kill her. However, in such a relaxed atmosphere of the East, the lady gradually became less afraid of everything around her. Only today, for the first time in a long time, someone's loud voice disturbed the peace of the Duke's daughter. It turned out that Isabel had finally been allowed to come, and she immediately ran to meet her sister. Just like last time, Paolo's daughter was horrified by her young relative's pink dresses, while the heroine saw no problem in wearing dresses from her father. But she couldn't argue with such an active and self-confident girl who was her relative. Isabel was even more angry at her sister because she still spoke to her formally. The lady remembered that her close connections in the court would help her, so she did not upset the girl. This is how Paolo's daughter mistakenly decided that her influence and beauty helped her in this matter. In fact, Isabel didn't just visit her sister, because she already had a prepared plan. Soon, a large-scale festival for merchants and commoners will take place throughout the East, and the girl wanted Ariana to enjoy the event with joy, which she would see for the first time. And for this, the lady was going to pick out beautiful outfits for her that would no longer be pink. But the young ladies did not know that the Duke of the West was still looking for the escaped Ariana. Rodion had long wanted to kill the blue-haired girl who had caused him problems all his life. This is how the peaceful journey of two relatives suddenly began to threaten them with real danger. Meanwhile, Isabel was horrified by the way Rachel treated her daughter. The heroine had long been accustomed to beatings, so she did not find them anything strange or unusual. Only people who lived in love and care understood how terrible a life Ariana had. So Isabel tried her best to console her sister in the hope that she would still trust Russell. All her life, the elder lady had seen how much White wanted his youngest daughter back. But the heroine didn't believe these words, so she continued to forcefully smile at everyone around her. Unlike the Duke, Isabel reacted much more furiously to her sister's false smiles. She did not want to see that the lady continued to hide her emotions in the free East. Ariana never thought that she would be able to openly talk about her resentment and anger. The heroine was only saved from further conversation by the fact that they arrived at a clothing store. This time, Ariana's smile was genuine, as she liked her active sister more and more. This is how Isabel easily got honesty from a girl who usually hid her emotions. But the ladies couldn't even imagine that they were already being insidiously and dangerously followed by mercenaries. Instead, they happily came to the store where Isabel had long been a regular customer. That's why she trusted the famous designer, with whom she had worked well in many ways. The store assistants immediately swarmed around Ariana to take suitable measurements. Only the heroine was unusual in such a bustle, because she had not yet chosen a dress for herself. But Isabel felt like a fish in water in this place, so she freely commanded everyone. During their conversations, the heroine managed to warm up to the girl who tried so hard for her. But their happiness was not destined to last long, because soon a loud noise was heard outside the store doors. One of the knights ran bravely towards him to check what was going on in the street, and this moment became his last, as the mercenaries mercilessly killed all the lady's defenders. Ariana always knew that she could be attacked again, but she was still scared because of the number of people. It immediately became clear to her that these guys had come only to take her with them. Previously, she had thought that her mother would not be so active in the middle of the day, but she couldn't even imagine that the Duke of the West would get involved and still hire people to capture her. Only this terrible man could act so openly, which the heroine did not have time to foresee. In this situation, she was most afraid for Isabel, who was not needed alive by the mercenaries. But the sister showed miracles of courage, because she jumped in front of Ariana to protect her. The lady had heard that in the East, even women were brave, but only now did she see it. But the mercenaries weren't scared by the furious gaze, as they had already killed all the guards. Isabel's angry speeches did not frighten them at all, but they did draw their attention to this girl. So now the guys set themselves the task of killing the lady who was interfering with their plans. In this case, the heroine still had a plan, although it did not include her own salvation. Ariana was sure that the mercenaries needed her alive, so she threatened to die. This really did make the boys freeze in their tracks, because the price for the life of the Duke's daughter was double. Only Isabel could not accept the fact that she was in great danger. Although the lady tried not to get attached to this girl, she could not let her die. So Miss hugged her sister tightly while she whispered her cunning plan in her ear. She had no doubt that the mercenaries would not leave Isabel alive anyway. That's why the lady pushed her sister hard, so that she ran away from the store as fast as she could. The killers did not expect such young ladies to use a deceptive maneuver right before their eyes. Some of the mercenaries chased after Isabel, but she knew all the corridors of the store much better than they did. Therefore, only one Ariana was caught, who sacrificed herself to save her sister. She easily convinced the mercenaries not to waste time on Isabel, since the testimony of one lady would not be important. The girl was lucky, and the bandits had to quickly flee to avoid running into the guards. Now the heroine's salvation was only in her hands, and she was not going to allow herself to be kidnapped so easily. Thanks to help from Ariana, Paolo's daughter safely escaped the hands of the cruel mercenaries. The girl was burning with shame because she couldn't help her sister, but she protected her. Such an escape was unusual for people from the East, but in that situation, Miss could do nothing more. That's how Ariana ended up captured, even before she had time to prove her usefulness to the White family. That's why the girl didn't even hope that someone from the East would come to her rescue. It was for situations like these that she had learned her skills from the Grand Duke of the North, back in the cave. The guy knew many ways to escape, and therefore explained everything well to Ariana in theory. He was sure that if the girl repeated his words exactly, she would definitely be able to escape. At that moment, the heroine, out of pride, was uncomfortable recognizing Kirus as her teacher. But now she was ready to idolize the guy who had told her so many useful things. Ariana remembered Karhi's words well, so she began by freeing her hands from the rope. After some time, she actually succeeded, and her chances of survival increased dramatically. She tried to remain as still as possible as she carefully freed herself from the bonds. It was only by a lucky chance that the lady kept the dagger, which the mercenaries did not find on her. While the guys were still chatting in a relaxed manner, the heroine was even able to peek out of the bag. As she expected, the mercenaries left a guard near her, although they did not believe in the possibility of escape. All this time, Miss lay obediently in the cart, but in fact she was already getting ready to run away. She understood that if the carriage left the city limits, escape would become impossible for her. These mercenaries dealt with the guards so quickly that it was clear how strong they were. But the lady remembered Ibaster's words, that the knights guarded all the exits and entrances to the city. It was at this very moment that the mercenaries started talking about the guards that had appeared in front of them. There might not be a better opportunity to escape, so Ariana didn't hesitate. The mercenaries did not believe in the young girl's abilities, so they turned away from her. This is exactly what the heroine took advantage of, and bravely jumped out of the carriage at full speed. This time the lady was lucky, and none of the guys managed to grab her to return her to the carriage. Her landing was hard, but it was still better than being kidnapped by assassins. It so happened that the girl landed right in front of the knights who had recently arrived in the city. It was Zior who returned home as quickly as possible, and his appearance became a salvation for the heroine. Ariana couldn't have imagined that her escape would turn out to be so successful for her. The heir to the East was one of those who loved to joke even in the most serious situations, so he looked mockingly at the cart with the mercenaries who were trying to escape from the place. Before the girl could even blink, some of her pursuers were dead on the spot. The guy was glad that the lady jumped out of the carriage right in front of him, because he saved her. Zior often resorted to prayer to higher powers to thank them for happy accidents. The heroine saw him for the first time, but no longer understood how to speak to this man. The heir quickly changed topics of conversation, which made him seem superficial and reckless. But in fact, his assistants had already captured 2 mercenaries alive for interrogation. And suddenly, Zior invited Ariana to join the torture in order to personally find out the truth. The heroine would never have refused such an opportunity because she was not afraid of blood and cruelty. The girl's behavior once again convinced Zior that she was more suited to the role of heir. Soon all the pieces of poison were removed from the mercenaries' mouths, so they could no longer die. Ovelian openly enjoyed the helplessness of the murderers because he hated such people. The poor guys knew perfectly well that they would not be able to remain silent for long. It was because the expression on Zior's face alone scared them to death, and he hadn't yet taken action. Rodion would not have taken such a high place if he had not thought out all his plans down to the last detail. He didn't have much faith in the mercenaries' success, so he began searching for important witnesses in Ariana's case. The Duke understood perfectly well that any person could hinder his reign in the future. Therefore, he was going to destroy all the witnesses so that no one could prove the girl's terrible life. Meanwhile, the mercenaries desperately resisted, trying to take all the secrets with them to the grave. But Ziora was not at all embarrassed by this persistence, because it was always only a temporary phenomenon. It was clear that the guys were trembling with fear, but they still tried to hold on until the very end, while the heir, with a sweet smile on his face, brutally beat the kidnappers of the Duke's daughter. No human being could withstand such emotional and physical pressure. Zior knew people's weak points too well, as he was professionally trained in this. The torture had to be stopped only because of the appearance of adults who were looking for Ariana everywhere. The heroine did not expect that her father and uncle would interrupt her entertainment with the mercenaries so soon. Russell's face showed how much he was worried about his daughter, who had been the subject of an assassination attempt. But the lady continued to communicate with the man she did not plan to trust in a distant manner. It pained the Duke to realize that he had not done enough to deserve his daughter's love. Palos was the first to notice the wounds on his niece's arms, although she paid them no attention. The lady was accustomed to severe wounds, so these scratches were just a trifle for her. But Palos and Russell weren't prepared to bring the girl to a place where people were being tortured. So it was the uncle who first realized that the lady needed to be taken to a safe estate as soon as possible. As soon as Zior was left alone with his adoptive father, he noted Ariana's beauty and grace. The guy immediately noticed that the Duke blamed himself entirely for the girl's broken character. But he had no intention of solving his father's emotional problems, because he preferred torture. Meanwhile, Palos was outraged by how careless Ariana was with her body. The man was furious that the girl stubbornly refused to pay attention to the pain. But the heroine really didn't understand why her uncle was so worried about her. She looked at her hands and saw only a pitiful semblance of pain and real wounds. In her past life, Ariana had been on the brink of death so many times that she didn't even think about stupid scratches. Several times, she had to deal with particularly painful wounds that were beginning to fester. However, the lady continued to sacrifice herself in the hope that at least someone would pay attention to her. But even the girl's husband didn't care about her, since he only saw her as a tool. This is how the heroine learned that she couldn't complain or suffer, so as not to attract attention. That is why the anxious words of her relatives so confused the lady, who was accustomed to pain. But every person in this family protected Ariana as if she was truly loved dearly. Even the men showed a lot of care for the lady, although she was accustomed to their heartlessness and coldness. The family's faces seemed unusually sad to the heroine, because she remained alive after the escape. Even the assistants were worried about the lady, while she had never seen anything like this before. Ariana sincerely could not understand where these people got so much kindness and care towards her. As soon as the girl entered the estate, the best doctor was immediately called for her. But the heroine never got any peace, because Isabel ran into her room. All this time, the girl was worried madly about her sister, whom she had to leave alone. Paolo's daughter, who was used to always protecting her loved ones, was tormented by her conscience. Only now did she feel a sense of relief that lifted the entire burden of responsibility from her shoulders. For the first time in her life, Isabel was glad that Zior had returned from the war early for the sake of bragging rights. No matter what her sister told her, Ariana considered her desire to protect the girl from the West stupid. Meanwhile, the adults of the White family held an emergency meeting due to what had happened to the Duke's daughter, and the heroine could not stay on the sidelines when it came to decisions about her future. The girl tolerated the pain so well that it seemed to everyone that she really had not suffered much. So the men found no reason to refuse the lady in her desire to join them. Only Langsley was wary of Ariana's appearance, although he already trusted her words and actions. The heroine was sure that the mercenaries were sent to her by the insidious Duke of the West. She had fought by his side in the past, so she was able to witness this man's cruelty firsthand. Only the lady was able to predict where the calculating Rodion's next blow would fall. But Miss thought too late that the witnesses in her case could be killed. At that very moment, one of the assistants burst into the office, bringing important news. The heroine's heart skipped a beat when she heard that her witness had indeed gone missing. For Ariana, this meant that the difficult and insidious game with the Duke of the West had already begun. One of the lady's important aristocrats was definitely dead, and no one would be able to find him now. During his reign, Rodion gathered around himself skilled assistants who quickly resolved matters. So all he could do was watch the decisions of the Duke of the East with a sly smile. Surprisingly, the heroine took this news calmly, which came at such an inopportune time for her. She could only hope that the mercenaries would soon talk under torture. The girl understood that fighting the Duke of the West would be extremely difficult in their situation. This man never made any mistakes, which is why he held his position for so long. In the past, he was always an obstacle for the ladies, and now everything has only become much worse. Zior understood that ideally, it would be good to know all the witnesses by name in order to call them to court. And the heroine was well prepared for this moment, as she remembered each of Rachel's guests. This preparation frightened Russell, because he realized that his daughter had had to survive all this time. Despite all her skills, the girl still did not lay claim to the role of heir to the East. What surprised the Duke most was that his daughter knew the entire judicial procedure well. It was very important to choose the right person to represent my interests in court. So Russell could not remain inactive at the sight of a lady who was fighting so hard for her life. Ariana had no idea that her words only worried her caring relatives even more. The girl never thought that her father would be ready to write letters to the emperor himself for her sake. Only Zior noticed how much Russell loved Ariana, even though he hadn't cared about her before. This seriously worried the guy, who had been in first place for the Duke of the East all his life. So, when they were alone, the heir tried to attract the attention of his stepfather. But all of Russell's thoughts were still focused only on his beloved daughter from the West. He was frightened by the calmness of the girl, who quickly made good decisions in difficult situations. Moreover, she personally agreed to observe the torture, even though it was brutal. But Ariana never looked away, as if she was used to watching something like this. The Duke was horrified by this, because he understood that his daughter had an extremely difficult life in the West. Zior also saw potential in the heroine, because her abilities could be useful in many places. But her father wanted to create a happy life for Ariana, who had previously seen only pain. However, the heir had a different opinion about the girl that the Duke of the East was trying to protect. He remembered well their first meeting, when the heroine jumped out of the carriage right at his feet. Then the lady's gaze frightened the guy a little, although he had seen belligerence in her eyes many times before. That's why Zior would like her father to give Ariana all the freedom she needs to act. The heir understood that the lady would hardly forgive the Duke, but love can melt any heart over time. The heroine tried to devote all her free time to useful learning through reading. True, even such leisure seemed like inaction to the girl, but she could not constantly live in tension. This time, Ariana's calm was suddenly interrupted by a knock on the door, as the Duke came to see her. The lady barely had time to tidy herself up in order to greet her father with dignity. Russell guessed what his daughter was doing, and was flattered by her desire to constantly learn. The man was quite tired of the fact that the lady was still speaking to him formally, but this did not cancel his desire to take a walk with the girl, which she did not dare refuse. Throughout their journey, Ariana felt awkward, because she didn't know what to talk about with her father. Suddenly, she noticed Isabel ahead, but this time the girl did not approach them. This behavior of her sister only made the heroine even more tense, and she began to suspect something. But in reality, all her expectations were exceeded with a bang, as the family arranged a surprise for the lady. Only she didn't remember her birthday, while the whites always celebrated it. Seeing such support, the heroine froze in place, as if she had just been struck by lightning. Isabel was the first to congratulate her sister, happy that they were finally celebrating this day together. And following her, the Duke modestly approached his daughter, whose heart was now ready to jump out of his chest. The man was glad that he could finally personally present a gift to his beloved daughter. He sent boxes to the Bronte estate every year, but the lady never received anything. The girl's heart sank pitifully when she realized how much everyone here loved her. Somewhere deep inside, the subconscious was still trying to remind the lady of the need to deny everyone, that Ariana was insanely afraid that she would be betrayed again and that she would experience incredible pain. That is why the past still did not let go of the heroine, although the present was much more pleasant. And this time, the girl could no longer contain the emotions that were overflowing within her. She finally opened her heart to the Duke, although before she hated him with all her heart for everything. At this time, the Duke of the West continued to act as he arrived at his daughter's estate. Rachel didn't expect her father to go so far and decide to destroy all the witnesses to Ariana's beatings. She had no doubt that all the necessary aristocrats had long since been killed. The Duke of the West had no pity even for his own daughter, as he hated failure.